everything is working properly.
Folks are able to join the meeting. We will begin the meeting in about 5 minutes or so. Anyone who wishes to speak during public comment should type their name and address in the chat box if you're not here. You will be called upon and unmuted when it's your turn to speak. Public comments that were submitted to the town clerk prior to the meeting, which we have some, which Elizabeth, our Mayor Pro Tem, and I will read. We'll read those first. As usual, public comments will be limited to no more than 3 minutes. Thank you for being patient with us as we adjust to hosting electronic meetings. There will be a time for public comment, and those comments are normally limited to 3 minutes. During the public hearing process, you'll be able to speak for a longer period than that if you so wish. Anyone who wishes to speak during the public comment period should type their name and address in the chat box if you're on Zoom, and you will be called on and unmuted when it's your turn to speak. Public comments that were submitted to the town clerk prior to the meeting will be read first by myself or the Mayor Pro Tem. As usual, public comments will be limited no more than 3 minutes, as I said a minute ago.
Yeah, tell them to give one more check.
I noticed I have to get rain has come back. Can we repeat this, Phil?
Yes.
Okay, one more time.
I almost put a long tape shirt on under this.
You get tired listening to it. Good morning. Again, this meeting will be held with all of our council members participating in person. The public may join us via Zoom, and many of you are in the room this morning, so you haven't got to join by Zoom. In order to allow the town clerk enough time to make sure that everything is working properly and folks are able to join the meeting, we will begin the meeting in about 5 minutes or less. Anyone who wishes to speak during public comments should type their name and address in the chat box if you're coming in on Zoom, and you will be called on and unmuted when it's your turn to speak. Public comments that were submitted to the town clerk prior to the meeting will be read first, and I have a number of those, and Mayor Pro Tem has a number of those. As usual, public comments will be limited to no more than 3 minutes. Thank you for being patient with us as we adjust to using and hosting electronic meetings. To repeat, anyone who wishes to speak during the public comment period should type their name and address in the chat box if you are on Zoom, or sign up here as you come in the door. And you will be called on when it's your turn to speak. Public comments that were submitted to the town clerk prior to first by myself or the Mayor Pro Tem. As usual, public comments will be limited to no more than 3 minutes. Thank you. Are you ready, clerk?
No.
I can't hear you.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you. The Town of Southern Shores Town Council meeting, workshop meeting for June 16th, 2020 is now in session. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. At this time, I'd ask you to join me in a moment of silence. Thank you. Council, I need a motion to approve the agenda. So moved. Thank you, Leo. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Jim. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Sheila, please note that all council members vote to approve the agenda. Thank you. In just a moment, I'll open general public comment, but first I want to welcome all of our Zoom attendees. The Carters from DEC, I think, are listening in, and Ken Wilson with Coastal Protection Engineering is also sitting in. And I want to welcome all of you here in the room for joining us this morning. Good to have you here. Wish we had a little more seating for you, but we're a little constrained in that right now because of our unwelcome intruder. At this time, I would start with the public comments. And Elizabeth, I'll take one and you can take one, but just rotate them. And if you have more back there, Sheila, you can provide those to us. Or those people can actually speak if they like. Dear Southern Shores Council, please do something, anything about the traffic. Please show leadership and address this problem with action. Thank you, Mr. Steve Hackman. Elizabeth?
Mayor and members of the Town Council, thank you for constructing a wonderful sidewalk along the east side of South Dogwood Trail. Our home is located at 102 South Dogwood Trail, and frankly, I'm amazed as well as gratified at the use the new sidewalk is receiving by walkers, including us, biking families, mothers pushing baby carriages, fathers towing wagons with toddlers, skateboarders, dog walkers, and whoever. It's a regular parade. As an engineer, I understand the difficulties the town engineer encountered as he minimized tree loss by winding the sidewalk among trees and property lines while preserving homeowner landscaping. I will admit that I was surprised at the number of diseased trees as evidenced by remnants along the side of the road. So much so that I suggest you, as a safety precaution for pedestrians and traffic alike, consider commissioning the town arborist to survey all trees within the right-of-way to determine their health. The design of the sidewalk fortunately includes curbs in critical areas. Curbs keep water from undermining the edge of the road, reducing maintenance and protecting the sidewalk and all who use it. Visually, however, the road appears narrower, and town drivers have a tendency to use more of the road than necessary, forcing southbound traffic either off the road or on its very edge, as evidenced by tire tracks all along the western edge of South Dogwood Trail. I can only repeat my comments from previous council meetings. South Dogwood Trail has to be widened to 24 feet. The problem is compounded by mailboxes that have been relocated too close to the edge of the road. So close, in fact, that they are frequently hit by right side view mirrors. Hit one myself just like last week while encountering oncoming traffic. I suggest the town advise homeowners to move such mailboxes to U.S. Postal Service recommended distances from the pavement edge. Thank you, Mayor Bennett, and thanks to all who made this project happen. Jim Groff.
The following comments from Betty House at 227 Seoach Trail. I know it is part of life here, but the speed of these people on Seoach is over the top. I will not walk the pups anymore on the weekends due to the speed. They see you trying to get them over to the edge of the road and they don't even slow down. Seeing the same disrespect for bikers and families walking with baby strollers or walking kids. 45 miles per hour is too high on these roads. It's 20 miles over the speed limit we'd add for that. Even when you scream to slow down, 95% do not and half shoot you the finger. Even my neighbor across the street stood in the street, but few slowed down, only vested around her unless she was in the middle of the road. Could we try mobile signs with speed like on Duck Road? Ideally, speed bumps, in my opinion. There's one woman dating a police officer. It would be nice when off-duty daytime if he would park at the bottom of the driveway. I see that on the past, the country club and near the turn at Hickory. They don't realize a lot of times no officer is present and no one can tell due to tinted windows. If anyone has better ideas, all for it. This lack of respect has to stop. Can't help it if it takes a few minutes longer to get to a rental property. Funny part, it takes them longer because these lights only let 4 cars through with at least 2 or 3 running a light. I had them back up before my house, which is the only time they are not speeding. The few doing the speed limit, I do shout out and thank you for doing so. Safety is a major issue, and the trash that is being thrown out is not acceptable either. Should not have to be picking up trash from jerks who can't wait till they get where they're going. Thanks for listening, Betty House.
This is from Amanda Bartell. Town Council, hello and thank you for the opportunity to comment on the recent increase in traffic in Southern Shores. As Southern Shores residents, my family and I usually don't plan on leaving the neighborhood on Saturdays, and we'll spend this time walking to the beach or the playground or just staying home. The traffic is to be expected, and you make accommodations through the summer season because our economy relies on tourism. However, these past 2 weekends have been ridiculous. This past Saturday, we had bumper-to-bumper traffic in front of our home on Wax Myrtle until nearly 9 p.m. Not even on a busy holiday weekend does this happen. There's absolutely no reason for cars to line up bumper-to-bumper on every street in the neighborhood. Not only is it irritating for the residents, but the tourists are not getting to their destinations any faster since they are going to have to make left-hand turns where there are no traffic lights. Thank the stars there were no emergencies in the neighborhood during this time. I work in a social work field, and I am occasionally on call for crisis response on the weekends as part of my job duties. And this level of traffic would make me very late to respond to a crisis. Perhaps the tourists are all coming at the same time this year since the rental companies are not allowing for early check-ins due to COVID. Whereas in the past, they would have staggered throughout the day, causing less congestion all at once. This is a very unique time, and I do not have the answer for how to fix this, but I do think we need to try something for the residents' sake and the tourists' sake. I implore you to look at all options and try something, anything. Please don't do nothing. Thank you for your time and hard work towards resolving this issue. Amanda Bartell.
Thank you. This letter is from Wendy Hawkins. My concern, drive-through traffic, has become unacceptable. I've lived on South Dogwood Trail for 15 years. The last few years it has been horrific. This past weekend was unacceptable. It is time to do something about it. We have had meetings, talks, studies, and traffic counts. Nothing is ever done to correct the problem except more meetings and studies. Last year, you experienced over the weekend close and counts. We were told that it didn't count vehicles that weren't going a certain speed limit. Why even do that? If you performed that count again on Saturday, it would appear that hardly any traffic existed, as the traffic was all at a standstill or a crawl for many hours. It would not detect any of the vehicles. In the morning, it was cars and pickup trucks flying north on South Dogwood, most likely workers trying to get north. This summer, it appears there will be 3 weekends with no left turns on South Dogwood. That's great, except why not do it every weekend? What seems to be the problem with trying to correct the problem? Close it on weekends for the summer, no left turns. Also, to sign on Dogwood when cars do a U-turn on 158, stating local residents only, stop ahead. Checkpoint for local identification. Have a police officer, or hired civilian if allowed, checking cars. Something needs to be done now to protect the Southern Shore citizens. If I had an emergency situation, and the police, paramedics could not get to me in my house on South Dogwood Trail in a timely manner due to traffic conditions that the town has been notified of and is aware of, and has not done anything about, and that's all one sentence, I believe there would be liability to the town and elected officials. This needs correcting now. Thank you, Wendy Hawkins.
This is from Tommy Carroll. Council and townspeople. Before the June 1st Town Council meeting, I submitted on behalf of the Cut Through Traffic Committee an email to be read aloud as part of the first public comment period. That email was inadvertently summarized during discussions on the no left-hand turn weekends and not read verbatim as it should have been. A key point was left out of the summary of my email is this. Although the Traffic Committee supports the council's decision to do a 3-weekend no left-hand turn trial, we do not think it's a long-term viable solution to solve the traffic problem in our town. We will analyze the data collected during the 3-weekend trial and look forward to submitting our findings this fall. In the meantime, we offer these suggestions to help ensure a successful trial. 1, signage on the north and south side of Wright Memorial Bridge alerting drivers of the no left turn onto South Dogwood Trail. 2, reprogramming the left turn arrow light at the entrance to South Dogwood to solid red. 3, no U-turn sign on northbound 158 at the entrance of Duckwoods Road. 4, officially notifying both Waze and Google Maps of plans for no left turn weekends. 5, notification of all rental companies on the Outer Banks with the strong suggestion that all renters be notified that no left-hand turns will be permitted onto South Dogwood Trail. 6, northbound car counters blanketing key locations including South Dogwood, Hillcrest Drive, Wax Myrtle Drive, Sea Oats Trail, Juniper Trail, and Ocean Boulevard at the split next to telecommunications tower. 7, unmanned blockades at both Porpoise and Dolphin Runs indicating no left-hand turns. 8, southbound car counters on South Dogwood Trail at the Dick White Bridge to collect data on cars using the town of Southern Shores as the cut-through to leave the beach on Saturdays and Sundays. 9, the passing of a town ordinance covering the above points. Again, it's respectfully submitted by Tommy Carroll.
Thank you, Elizabeth. This letter is from Victoria Green for public comment. Good morning, all. Wow, what a horrendous weekend most of us had to endure due to unprecedented traffic. Not only on Hillcrest Drive, but the other side streets as well. Most of them congested now until 8 to 9 p.m. at night. Tourists turning Hillcrest Drive into a one-way, double-lane street, causing a huge safety issue for oncoming traffic. I did contact the non-emergency number when this occurred. We almost witnessed a head-on during this time. We had pictures of a police officer pulling a vehicle over. Thank you to this officer, but he couldn't even get the fender off the side due to all the other vehicles blocking the road. Huge RVs, trucks pulling huge pontoon boats. I seriously do not know how they maneuvered Dogwood Trail. It's already a tight squeeze with all the sidewalk construction. Not to mention the horn honking, yelling, and dogs being walked to do their business on sides of the street. I do understand that the town council has agreed to do no left turn trial for 3 weeks this summer, 3 weekends. I know the residents of Hillcrest Drive are greatly looking forward to that little break. We need to start somewhere, and it is a good start. However, this clearly is a much larger problem that needs to stay at the top of everyone's list as being an important issue, especially for the safety of the residents that are in the affected areas. Thank you for listening. Victoria Green. And that's the last of these that I have. Do you have any more, Elizabeth?
No.
I have a public comment sheet here with people's names on it, which I'm going to read out and ask you individually. If you signed up to speak as a public in the public comment period, we'll let you speak now. If you came here to speak about beach nourishment, you might want to wait till you have after the public hearing or during the public hearing, you'll have more time to actually share your thoughts. So I'll call your name if you want to speak with more time for the public comment period for the public speaking for the beach nourishment public hearing. You'd be able to do that with more time. The first name on the list is I'm struggling with Jay.
Yeah, that's me, Jack Warner. I'm related to the. Very brief, has nothing to do with the beach. Talking about Trinity Trail down in that recreation area in Chickahawk, where the road surface has now got like 6-inch deep depressions from where it is sunk. They're not sinkholes, but just low spots. For local residents, it's just uncomfortable driving, but for tourists, it can be a real, it's a serious enough bump that it can be a real distraction. I appreciate it if you get the engineer to take a look at that and see if there's anything you can do to clean up that surface there. It's starting to get pretty complicated.
This is area near the playground, is that correct?
Yeah.
When you come over that first hump and then that drop down?
Like there are 3 or 4 of those depressions.
Right, like moguls.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it reminds me of skiing. But again, it's just uncomfortable for me because I'm familiar with it and I slow down enough. But, boy, if you're traveling even if the speed limit is slightly over, it can be distracting enough if you're not familiar with it. It can cause some problems.
Thank you.
Yep. Thanks for your time.
Greg Alford, I think.
Greg? Do you want to speak now to each other, or do you wait till we're here? Go ahead.
If your comments are concerning beach nourishment, you might want to wait and speak to them during the public hearing. You'll have more time to speak.
Okay,
But you can speak now if you wish under public comment.
it probably won't be more, I'm allowed 3 minutes now, is that right?
Yes, sir.
Right up there tonight.
It won't take longer. Thank you very much. Craig Albert, 74 Gravy Pond. I'm just going to reiterate what I've said on 2 previous occasions, that I think that we should get a second opinion on beach nourishment from somebody other than Aptum. And I've said before, we have the research facility right up the road. And why aren't we utilizing them? I know some people have said that they don't have the expertise in beach nourishment. I find that hard to believe. But whether they do or not, whatever input they had would be relevant to this issue. And it's free. That's what I don't understand. When you get something for free, why don't you take it? Whatever information they have. If you don't feel it's relevant, then disregard it. But it seems to me that we should at least seek their advice. That's one thing. The other thing is, during this time, I don't think that this board or any board, and that includes the state of North Carolina, the federal government, should get involved in any capital expenditures that they haven't considered up until now. We don't know how much revenue we're going to have in this town. We don't know how much revenue this county's going to have. We just simply don't understand what's happening to our economic situation now or in the future. Now they're talking about a second wave. Is this going to happen in the fall? Is it going to happen next year? But why would we go and look for another huge expenditure of money when we don't know how much money we're going to bring in? And I just think that any capital expenditure at this time would not be a prudent thing to do. That's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Martin Miller.
I'm over here. I'm gonna hold my comments because it's about beach nourishment.
Thank you. I thought you might want to do that. Kevin Whaley.
Here, I'll do the same thing.
Thank you, Mr. Whaley. Ms. Schwarzman. Good morning, Ann.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. It's nice to see you in person for a change. I hope you've all been well. 69 Hickory Trail. I'd just like to say a word about the traffic as well, because I'm on the cut-through route right near the East Dogwood left turn onto Hickory. And I would like to emphasize what the others have said about the past 2 weekends, in particular about the past 2 Saturdays, which have been horrendous. I've never seen such traffic backed up like it has been. I'm a little concerned that the traffic counters, and Chief Cole can speak to this, are not going to get all the traffic because they were traveling at less than 5 miles per hour. And that was a problem in the past with some of the counters that they didn't register. Hopefully, you'll get a fair count of how many vehicles did come through. I wanted to share some of the comments that I received on the Beacon over the weekend, in particular this past weekend, to give you an idea. Vicki mentioned the 2-lane road going one way on Hillcrest Drive, which clearly is a problem. Somebody else who lives in the 300 block of Wax Myrtle Trail told Beacon me that it took him 3 hours to get from the start of the Wright Bridge to his home on 300 Wax Myrtle. He might as well have been on Interstate 95 trying to get through Fredericksburg, as far as I'm concerned. He was traveling from 5:30 to 8:30 on Saturday night. Ditto with Wax Myrtle. I heard some comments about Wax Myrtle. We don't have backups on Wax Myrtle like we did this past weekend. On Hillcrest, on Sea Oaks, all those streets were just jammed up, bumper to bumper, not moving. 2-hour wait, according to some tourists who were saying, "Why do you live here? How can you deal with this?" They were 2 hours on Wax Myrtle Trail. I also talked to some people in front of my house at Hickory Trail in East Dogwood, asked them how far back did it go. This was about 4:30 on Saturday. They said all the way back to the bridge, solid traffic through the neighborhood. And if Craig Albert were here, he could tell you that he was over near the bridge and he saw the continuous flow. Left turn, left turn, left turn, left turn. Very few, no breaks. So I just want to emphasize what the others have said. I don't think you can sit and wait until July 4th. I think something needs to be done now, whether it's with Waze or some other method for deterring the traffic, because it definitely is a safety problem. And I would hate to see a preventable tragedy happen. And it could, when you can't get to people in distress because of the traffic being so jammed up. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Ann. Mark Mansfield.
I'm going to wait until the beach nourishment.
Thank you, Mark. This time I'll close public comment.
Yes, sir, we have 2 more.
Oh, I'm sorry. Didn't know that.
Mr. Von Giesen?
Hello, can y'all hear me? Was that a yes?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Joe Van Giesen, 228 North Dogwood Trail. A few quick comments. One, I would like the town council to postpone consideration of the town engineer contract. I think that it would be best for the town to conduct that whole evaluation and get recommendations from the new town manager. He will be the primary point of contact with the engineer, and I believe he should be involved in the process. Secondly, I definitely concur with all of the comments about traffic. It was unbelievable the last 2 weekends. And just want to add one fact. I checked Waze around 5:30 on Saturday, and some of the residents indicated that they heard that it was backed up to the bridge. Well, according to Waze, it was backed up to the water park on 158 in Jarvisburg. So it's terrible. And in preparation for the left turn, no left turn weekends, I hope that there is a plan in place for the data collection and evaluation. Not to be critical of what was done in past years, because it's a learning process involved. Now we're going to have an investment in 3 weekends of information collection. And I think we ought to have a plan for how we're going to do it, and the how we're going to do it should be in coordination with the design of the analysis that would be conducted. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. No problem.
Morning, everyone. Christine Cuses, 76 Spindrift Trail. I put it out there about the traffic on my Facebook page, and also there's an app called Nextdoor, and of course received a lot of comments, concerns, whatever. I'm continually asking people to provide ideas to solve the problems, not to just complain about them, because we're not going to get anywhere that way. So I love Tommy Carroll's ideas. Actually, a lot of his ideas are my ideas, and a lot of the people that were commenting on my Facebook page. So here's the thing. We need a permit to drive on the beach. You can't get on the beach to drive on the beach without a permit. So here's what I propose. Do a simple, and I printed this out on 8.5 by 11, but this can be 3 by 2, the same exact size as the sticker that you have. Anybody that lives in Southern Shores full-time year-round should not have to go all the way around if they live on Gingite and they can't take a left on Dogwood. That's ridiculous. So here's a little sticker. It's very simple, not going to cost a lot of money. SSR permit annual 2020 to 2021. Bam, put that on your windshield. Also, there are 6 entrances: Porpoise, Dolphin, East Dogwood, Hickory, Hillcrest, 11th, also Juniper and North Dogwood. Have a cop there and put a sign up, a temporary sign that says, no through traffic, $300 fine. Hit people where it hurts them, in their pocket. Try to have some community support. Try to have some, not community support, but like a subcommittee, just like a neighborhood watch. Gather these people and they can stand there with the cop. They can, have coffee with them. They can actually just be out there as support. And don't let anybody take a left on any of these streets. We had how many cops at all of the bridges during the pandemic? We had 20 cops at a time there. We don't need 20 cops. We only had 2 lanes coming in. So I believe it's only 30 days total, Memorial Day to Labor Day, every single weekend, only on Saturday and Sunday. And it's really only about 8 hours a day, guys. So if we can try to get help from, I know that Kitty Hawk helps at 158 and Duck Road to control not blocking that traffic. So Kitty Hawk, Duck, and Southern Shores, they're always there. And that's fantastic. I mean, I called for 10 years in a row, non-emergency 911, to complain that people were blocking, and 2 or 3 times the light would turn and people don't care. So they finally did that, which was great. But I think we also have to incorporate Corolla, which is Currituck County. We need to tell them we need their cop support as well, because these people are trying to get to Duck, but they're also trying to get to Corolla and Corova, and that's not our county. So maybe Currituck could probably get involved and offer some support, and the sheriff's department. Like, we need to get as many people, let me see my notes, here we go. Oh, and also, we don't have to leave those no through parking signs up all year round.
Your time is up, so I'm sorry.
Okay, that's okay. I'm gonna put all my ideas together and I'll send it to you. Thanks, Tom.
Thank you. Anyone else, Sheila? Thank you. This time I'll close second, public comment for the second time. Thank you. Under business items this morning, I got first item for consideration is a planning board appointments, tab 1 in your book, council. Planning board member Ed Lawler's term will expire on June 30th, 2020. He was previously appointed by the town council on January 8th, 2019 to fill the position formerly held by Glenn Weeder. Mr. Lawler has indicated he would like to continue serving on the town planning board, which would be a 3-year term from July 1st, 2020 till June 30th, 2023. There currently are no applications on file from citizens interested in serving on the town planning board. Council, I'd make a motion that we reappoint planning board member Ed Lawler to another 3-year term commencing July 1st, 2020. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Leo. Got it. Any further discussion, council? Hearing none, I'd ask for the vote. All in favor of my motion indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Elizabeth, aye. Leo, aye.
Aye.
Aye. Matt, aye. And the mayor says aye. So the motion is made and carried. Mr. Waller will serve a 3-year term commencing July 1st, 2020 on our planning board. Thank you. At this time, we are scheduled to have a continued discussion of our town engineer contract. This is in response to quotations were submitted to us by a number of engineers prior to our last meeting. Who'd like to start this off? Anyone want to speak up?
I'll start it off, but I may need the town attorney's help in the formalities, the processes to do this. I'd like to withdraw the motion that I made to hire the Joe Anloff as the town engineer at our last meeting. Can I just do that? Or do we need to vote on it?
It's your motion. You can withdraw it. And remember, if everybody will recall, what was tabled was your actual consideration of your motion. So we're kind of rewinding back out to that. So we're at the point of the next thing to do would be either to withdraw it or to discuss it and vote on it. So if you'd like to withdraw it, you can do that.
Do I need to put that in the form of a motion to withdraw it?
No.
Okay, I'd like to withdraw the motion that I made at our last meeting to hire Anloff Deal as the town engineer.
And then now it would be up for more discussion or someone else to make, or you to make a motion as to how to go forward.
All right, now that I've withdrawn that motion, I'd like to make a motion to retain Anloff Engineering and Deal Engineering to serve as the town engineer for a period of 2 years commencing July 1st, 2020, and that this contract may be extended for 1 or more additional years by the town manager with council approval.
Thank you, Jim. We have a second to Mr. Connor's motion.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Leo. Any further discussion?
Yeah, before we call for the vote, I need to read in a comment I got back on June 5th from a resident over on South Dogwood, and goes into the issue, that problem he had with the retaining walls and the sight line and issues with it. I respond, and it came to my personal email. I responded, that was at about 2:11 p.m., and then I responded to him and said, thanks for the email and your observations. I will forward to the acting town manager so he can share with the town engineer. You got to remember, this is Friday afternoon now. And about 5:23, I got a response back from this resident and said, met with both this afternoon. Initial thought is to tear down part of the hill to improve sight distance and add a danger sign. Then it said, thanks for forwarding my comments. Quick response by the acting town manager and town engineer. I like Joe as an engineer. He listens. That is a valuable trait. And I just think on Friday afternoon, getting that type of service, to me, that's excellent customer service. And so that's, I want to make sure, and Sheila, I'll have a copy for you. So I wanted that in before we vote.
Well, thank you, Leo. Appreciate that. Any further discussion? Any comments?
I have just a question about the contract before we vote. We let out services for engineering for potentially beach nourishment. We have an engineer doing our beach nourishment design for us that is not our town engineer because that's not his expertise. Should we have a project that there would be a more qualified engineer, I would like to reserve the right to bid out those projects. If it was a whole-scale stormwater project or something of the nature that there might be a more qualified firm out there to retain, I would like to retain that ability. And I don't think that the contract with the engineer really precludes that, so we might not have to do anything, but that's my comfort level with accepting this we had some good qualified people and some of the infrastructure projects that I see the town needing to face. I think there's some discussion to be had about who's most qualified for it, but I'll be confident with our current engineer, as said, as long as I would like to restrict a dollar value personally, any project over $250,000. There's a bunch of people here that probably want to hear about beach nourishment, not our town engineer, so I'm willing to move forward, but I want to stipulate that for the record, please.
Any problem with that, council?
Is there a way to write the contract to address some of this issue? Or once the new town manager is here, can the contract be developed that has some of this consideration in the contract? Is that fair?
Yeah, I don't think there's anything in the contract, in the past contracts, that have made Joe or Deal or whoever's been the Quabble, whoever's been the engineer in the past, an exclusive engineering firm. I think that you're signing them up to do the general projects that you have on a day-to-day or week-to-week basis, and you can give them big projects if you want to, or you can always go out and get other engineers to do specific projects. Just recall that if you do that, you still got to follow the statute. You got to go out and do the RFQ process for engineers to do that, unless it's under 50,000 and you go through some trouble to make a vote to avoid that.
Okay. Thank you for explaining that.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. I mean, it's the same thing. Like we had a different engineer design beach nourishment or embark upon designing, so it's not something we have to. I'm good.
Thank you, Matt.
General.
Any further discussion? You all right?
Good. Sorry.
Not, I'd call for the vote. All in favor of retaining Anloff and Deal Engineering for the 2-year term as mentioned in the original motion that Jim made, please indicate by saying aye.
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 I vote aye. Did you get that, Sheila? Thank you. The next item on the agenda, council, is a discussion of no left turn weekends. Strange how it all kind of ties back in and with all this traffic comment. I'm going to make a couple of statements about what I've been doing for the past 2 weeks trying to work on this issue, and without tooting the horn, just say we've spent some time on this behind the scenes. Council had earlier committed to 3 no left turn weekends for this summer, based in large measure on our ability to maintain and man the intersections with our police officers. We are seeing traffic volumes each weekend similar to what we would expect to see on our worst for the July weekend. It's been, without trying to steal anybody's thunder, it's been kind of crazy. We currently plan to close the left turn lane on 158 at South Dogwood for 3 weekends this summer, July 4th and 5th, July 25th, 26th, and mid-August. In the past, I have not been an advocate of closing our roads. I just felt it was just part of the burden of living here for that 7 or 8 weekends a year, and even though I didn't like it, I didn't feel we could do much about it. We tried a no left turn 2 or 3 years ago in a June weekend, and it wasn't a good test because it wasn't a really heavy traffic weekend. We all recognize that, I think. We didn't get the test data we expected to get because we didn't have the volume of cars we have coming through right now. Nobody's fault, just didn't work. Didn't give us the information. So I guess my question is, is it worth considering closing access to South Dogwood for the remaining weekends in June? And how do we make that happen? And that was a question I went to a number of sources to get answers to. First, I went to our town manager and said, can you talk to NCDOT and see if they will allow us to do a lane closure on 158 at the entrance to South Dogwood without police officers present? And will they still furnish signage for us? At least this one sign they promised, which is a sign on the east side of the bridge saying basically what the wording will be. I don't know on that big sign, but it'll be something to do with there's no left turn at South Dogwood. giving people a warning. The next hurdle was going to make sure that the Kitty Hawk police and the town were okay with this process. And Chief Cole, myself, and interim town manager Haskett met with the Kitty Hawk mayor and chief of police and town manager, and they didn't exactly give it their blessing, but they said they would work with us on it, and it would not be an issue. They'll help us try to solve the problem. Our barrel provider was asked if he could furnish barrels for additional weekends, and I think the answer to that, David, where'd you go, David? That he could manage that. I want to make sure I had that correct. I don't want to overstate. So we have the barrel people are available. We have the Kitty Hawk Police supporting us. We have NCDOT advising us they will furnish the additional signage and gave it their blessing, if you will. I asked our town attorney what his thoughts were as to liability. I think that's an issue that we should all be concerned about, obviously. In the event someone did what would be, we'd call it stupid, but it might be a bad accident. And he assured me that while there was some risk, it was not, he didn't feel it was, and if I'm saying wrong, you tell me, he didn't feel it was enough risk to stop what we were trying to do. Is that essentially correct, or do you make it more clear than that?
That's essentially correct, Mr. Mayor.
All right, thank you.
And that's the risk of being liable for someone having a wreck at the intersection.
Right.
That was the liability that we were discussing.
Thank you for clarifying that. I appreciate that. And while I recognize that these efforts may not solve the problems for all the residents, the traffic, as we've seen in the past, even when it wasn't a bumper weekend or a boomer weekend like we've had the past 2 or 3, people are going to find ways to get on your streets. They're going to find a way they can. Anybody who would spend time driving around Circle Drive looking for a way to duck, you got to realize what you're dealing with, especially when you go around Circle Drive twice. So we just have to acknowledge the fact that they don't know where they are in many cases, and a lot of them don't know where they're going or how to get. Even though they have tools in their car available to them, they don't usually always use them. They don't always use them. So I guess what I'm asking is, would council like to consider closing the 2 additional weekends in June, which we would do on our own, and the cost for that would be about $7,400, which would involve, if we decide to move forward, would involve us also moving forward with a budget amendment to cover that. I'm going to see if I have anything else I want to add before I leave it open for discussion for the rest of you folks. I will say, having worked with the county control group through the last 3 months or more on different issues having to do with the coronavirus primarily, but I would guarantee you that none of us in that group, I'm going all the way to the top of that group, as far as leadership, would have anticipated the kind of volume of traffic we're seeing right now. We were relatively certain that we were going to see a diminished traffic because of the fear associated with the virus, and because the people, in fact, they would maybe not have the resources to take that long trip away and spend those dollars. We were 180 out. We missed it completely, and it's just something we all missed. I didn't anticipate this kind of volume of traffic. I don't think any of us would have, but we're seeing it. It's really I won't say what I think it is, but it's not good for us. It's not a healthy situation. So if that said, Council, what are your thoughts? And you can share them with me if you'd like, or say what you want to say. Elizabeth, I'd ask you to go first if you're okay with that.
Yeah, sure. Have we looked into just purchasing the equipment that's necessary to close the lane down? Instead of
I'll let our town manager answer. I don't think we have. We may have looked into that, though. We had some costs, I think.
I think it was done last year or year before. David can attest to that. And I think we discovered it was quite more expensive to purchase our own equipment than it was to contract it.
Okay.
I don't remember the numbers. David, do you remember the numbers?
I don't remember the numbers. One issue we were going to run into was storage of the barrels. Well, the cost. I don't remember the storage.
You're gonna have to pay town staff to know it works without.
Right. So I guess just to confirm that we're choosing the most efficient and cost-effective manner, could we maybe just go through that exercise again
We
to
can.
verify
Yes, ma'am.
that that is the case?
We can.
And think about storage, maybe not on town property, maybe we could ask partners, whether it's civic association or fire department or whatever we can think of for other opportunities for storage.
There's also the opportunity for renting a storage locker over across the bridge.
So there's that.
And I mean, I don't know how much those cost, but
Yeah, just sort of think about, what the opportunities are and just to look at it
We can-
from
we can
terms of,
make curbside
cost effectiveness.
the 7,400, I'm sorry, did I?
Go ahead.
Oh,
Matt might want to store the barrels at his house so
I
he
was
can
just
block
saying
off
make
the entrance to Wax Myrtle.
Price is right, you'll start at your place.
Services rendered.
I'm wondering if that $7,400 figure for the barrel rental, was that just for the 3 additional weekends or
Two additional weekends.
2 additional weekends? Because if Wes, you and Mr. Bradley can go ahead and do the cost analysis, it may be better for us just to purchase those things and get a locker across the bridge to store them in. Factor that cost in too. I have no idea how much those things cost over there, but they're generally not a budget
You're
buster.
gonna have to have a big one.
We will certainly explore other options.
Thank you.
I would make a couple notes to that. One issue, obviously, is if it's going to be a long-term,
Yes,
I'm looking here, not just this year, but maybe into next year and the year following, because the bridge is going to be the determining factor when we having to stop doing this.
yes.
Let's hope so.
The longer the term, more sense it might make, but the thing you have to realize is that somebody's got to put those barrels in place and be on duty with those barrels, because people run into them, knock them down. And the contractor we have now guarantees he will do that with have somebody there with the barrels the whole time they're in place. That involves our public works people or someone else we have to hire to bring in and make sure that they're being maintained properly and get them back and forth to storage, things like that. I'm not advocating either way. I'm just saying that we need to be conscious of those.
Yeah, I'm not advocating either way. I'm just trying to think outside the box and figure out what is the most cost-effective way, especially if we were able to do far more weekends with a no left turn set up. And not just far more weekends this year, but the following years.
Right. In my comment, I said that we should consider doing these 2 weekends in June and possibly beyond that. I think we have to weigh that today, and we can make that decision when it comes time to, but we should probably be thinking ahead and say we want to maybe protect that 3rd or 4th weekend in July as well.
Right. Well, the town staff and, well, Mr. Bradley included, we've just asked them to go ahead and do a cost analysis. Do we need a motion to go ahead and include?
Can I say something? If he is wanting to do the weekend coming up and the next weekend, I don't think that we're going to have time to order the barrels and get them here and that sort of thing. So
Yeah.
that's something that y'all might need to consider if you want to go ahead and do the 2 this in June. And you do the budget amendment for the 7,400, and then that'll give us time to do, we can do all of that, but I don't think we're going to be able to turn it around and get them here to use by this weekend. That's just my input.
Yeah, that's what I was
That's the
thinking.
problem.
So what weekends are we covering? Well, theoretically, let's assume you could do it, which you can't. I get it. So that'd be 2 weekends in June and 2 weekends in July and 1 weekend in August, right?
Yeah.
So where are our holes? Would we want to reappropriate, if we can't do the 20th, we want to slide that into July and make more of a stacked block of coverage than
Right.
sort of breaking it up.
As much as
Does that make
possible,
sense?
continuous coverage.
I apologize for all the public comment. You might have one more weekend of hell. It might be all summer of hell. I don't know what we're trying to.
Well, and
I'd rather cover a consistent time period, unmanned and manned, watch the traffic counts and see what we got. Because we'd potentially be covering 5 weeks straight at that point.
because part of this is doing it without law enforcement presence
No,
is going to be a test. So we really need to see if we're going to achieve the results that are desired. And so I don't want to think about purchasing equipment if it turns out that that's not going to do what we want it to do.
Yeah, and that's really the purpose of rentals is, you use it, you're paying just for the use of that time. And if we need to figure out, I think, in this short term, we're talking about 2 weekends plus the 3 that we rent. And if we decide that that's going to work, then long term, it might be considered, we might want to consider purchasing them. But the bad part about it is we then have to maintain everything. The barrel gets torn up, somebody hits it, and we can't repair it. If we've got another one to buy, or if you rent it, that responsibility is not ours.
Well, that's where our staff can do the cost analysis, I think.
I mean, I'm coming from, it's just like when you rent equipment for a specific portion of a contracting job.
Well, let's see the dates. I mean, we do unmanned the 27th, we do man the 4th, we do unmanned the 11th, we do man the 18th, we do,
Right.
and we potentially, I mean, I'd go right through August 1st and just flip flop, unmanned man. I mean, we could start with just the 27th and the 11th as the unmanned and continue along with our man. And if we want to add in the 25th, I think we can discuss that. That would be 3 manned and 3 unmanned, 6 weeks covered.
Yeah, and I think that's, the challenge is, and I sat through a webinar via the Tourism Bureau last Tuesday, and the thing that's got us in the box that we don't have control of is we are now labeled a drive-to vacation spot. Forbes magazine came out and said, Outer Banks, you're #1. And what they're finding in all the surveys, people are not flying. They're going to be driving to, and we happen to be pretty close, and we're getting them from Delaware, some New York, not quite yet, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Indiana, Tennessee, West Virginia, even as far west as Raleigh. I just saw one the other day. There's a couple going to fly to California for vacation. Well, guess what? They couldn't fly, so they ended up going to the Great Smoky Mountains for their week. But they can drive. So right now, people are feeling more comfortable about driving, not flying. And all of a sudden, and people have been pent up. Let's face it, some of us have been too. Wanting out, the kids are out of school, and the surveys indicate we're going to have them, and how we control it. There's just no way to keep it under control. And I don't go out driving around because I don't want to get caught in all the traffic. But I do watch Waze, and I mean, it's unbelievable. This past weekend was miserable. And then when you see traffic somewhat heavy on Circle Drive, there's something wrong. I mean,
Waze is not.
what in the world are you going on Circle Drive other than a circle?
There's a fishing pond back there.
Well, yeah, there's a pond there that SFCA owns and a nice bridge.
There used to be a pond there.
Yeah, I guess I haven't been up there to look at it lately.
Can I ask a question, Bonnie, Russ? And I guess, David, you're part of this process as well. Was Mary going to get the mails this weekend, this coming weekend? Do we know that for a fact?
I doubt it. I mean, we can certainly check, but I doubt it.
It's Tuesday.
They're on board for what, 2 weekends away?
Are you talking about the contractor or us purchasing?
No, not purchasing, not
Contractor is
purchasing.
on board and ready to go. Yes, sir.
The contractor's going to get that mails this coming
This
weekend.
weekend and next weekend, he agreed that
So we could do this
said that he was
coming-
available.
Well, let's see what's going to happen, because I can tell you, we're going to have an onslaught of people for up through probably the middle of July, based on the surveys that I've seen.
What I'm saying is, I was trying to see if we could do this coming weekend, which is 3 days away?
Yeah.
4 days. Saturday and Sunday, and then the following weekend as well for sure, and then our
manned is
manned
the
weekend kicks in after that.
Then we have a whole the 11th and manned of the 18th. Well,
So we will meet again though before.
the 5th, yeah.
Yeah, so why don't we postpone any further action until we see how our 2 weekends go. And then we can do what we need to do at the July meeting.
Yeah.
That hits right on what I was about to say, because I think that just implementing a no left turn up at the intersection up there, we should be going beyond that, and that is collecting the data, the traffic count data, to see what ramifications there may be. And then rather than being totally reactive on whatever happens, we need to be proactively thinking about the reactive processes here so that we can be ready to go ahead and talk to Chickahawk and say, look, can we close that bridge, for example, to stop the cut through? We don't know exactly what's going to happen. We can make educated guesses, but anyway, I'm all in favor of starting this ASAP for as many weekends as we can, and let's collect the data and get moving
We're
on this.
locked in, we can lock in apparently for the last 2 weeks in June here.
Yeah.
Today. And we've already locked in for the first week in July. So we can, at that time, during the July meeting, we can make a decision whether to move on with more of our own unpoliced efforts after that. Everybody pretty much on board with that?
Yes.
I have no problem.
What do I need in the way of a motion?
Be added to the budget amendment that we would have on the 7th?
No, sir,
It's separate.
in this fiscal year, so
Yeah.
I need a motion to approve the budget amendment for $7,400 to pay for the rental of the barrels for.
Yeah.
This weekend.
Just before we do that, which I would like to do that, just going back to Tommy Carroll's points, I know a lot of this has already been checked off. I think some of it, we have issue actually implementing, the signal pre-programming. I know is something that everybody always talks about, whether we can or not, just try. I know you're already probably going to. The Waze and Google, biggest outlier. If we do some kind of resolution, or do we, what can we broadcast out there that gets picked up on traffic services? I mean, let's post a parade notice. We're having a parade this summer.
I know the previous town manager did some research into that and determined that it was difficult to get them to do anything within a reasonable time.
Yeah.
But we're certainly not opposed to exploring that again to see what, if anything, we can do. And with respect to reprogramming the signal, I did reach out to NCDOT again and asked them if that can be done, and I've yet to receive a response.
Well, I think when they were here for the cut-through committee meeting, and that was when we had the previous engineer Jennings, they were not in favor of it, so I don't know where they'll.
They did relent, though. They said if you're going to do multiple closings, that they would alter the traffic signal. So, I mean.
There was a guy that was sitting over here who said that he could look into it.
And that was,
but that's all, we never heard any more back from it.
well, Wes is on it, so I mean.
Yeah.
I'll report to y'all as soon as I receive it.
And then, I guess my point is, if there needs to be formal action, there's a motion for the budget amendment, is it copied that we're going to somehow notify Google or Waze that the road's closed? I mean, does it need to be an ordinance? Does it need to be a resolution?
I think a resolution would be a strong message, and that's something that we can work on for your July meeting possibly, and have the language for y'all to consider and look at
Let's
that time.
put that in motion.
The challenge with Waze is.
Oh, it might be an uphill battle, I get it, but let's do
The
it.
challenge is they report live information.
I understand.
And that's what kills you on it. If you shut it
It's
off.
like when there's a
here,
traffic wreck on a highway. Your GPS picks it up, gives you a notice. There's some reporting mechanism out there. Waze gets they're going to actually track the vehicle motion.
They're not right there. Mine know my GPS system on my truck. If there's a delay, it'll try to reroute me. And, I'm not the only one that has that.
Yeah.
I think
that there is a tremendous delay throughout our town streets.
Oh, yeah, well, you just have to.
Anyway, let's beat the dead horse.
We're beating something.
I would like to make a motion to appropriate $7,400 for the mayor's suggestion with the 20th and the 27th, the weekend of the 20th and 27th barrel rental, and subsequently develop a resolution for our July, first week meeting in July to notify requisite authorities of our road closures.
Does that do it, Bonnie?
Yes, sir.
I'll second it.
You have a second?
I did.
Thank you, Leo. Any further discussion, council?
Just thank you for all the effort you've had in the last
Thank
couple
you,
of weeks
Matt.
on this.
Yes, there is one more point that I'd like to make. We're on the cusp of kicking things up as far as trying to solve this problem this year. It's not going to totally solve this problem. I think council needs to have some discussions about further methods, that we can implement for next year. We need to start looking at next year already too. And one idea that I had mentioned before that got a good chuckle out of the audience, but I'm really not joking, is that we start scheduling some street improvements on South Dogwood. And there are needed street improvements on South Dogwood. And then that can just be closed on all traffic apps because it's under construction. So anyway, that's a little longer range, but I'm ready to vote.
That's why, that's the CIP committee needs to look into that.
Yes, and we can put that in Matt's lap.
Now, do we need to add the whole business about looking into purchasing, or you guys just take that as an instruction? Okay,
We'll do
never
that.
mind. Okay,
And
we're
one
covered.
other note I just wanted to make is
We have a
that
motion to
we'll-
second. We vote on that.
we'll enter into a memorandum of understanding with Kitty Hawk.
Oh, there you go. That's the other thing.
That's what we agreed on with the police chief and manager of Kitty Hawk.
Okay,
It'll be similar to the one that was done last time.
got it. Okay.
So I guess the motion of council indicate their support for this by saying aye.
Aye.
Elizabeth?
Aye.
Leo?
Aye.
Aye.
And the mayor says aye. So motion's made and carried to bring some barrels on board and a couple other things which we talked about. Our last item of business, I think, for this morning is a public hearing for beach nourishment. And at this time, I'll turn the meeting over to our town attorney, Mr. Gallup, to conduct that hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Ben.
This is a public forum, public hearing, however you'd like to call it, an opportunity for you to speak about your thoughts on the town pursuing or not pursuing beach nourishment project. I'm not going to have a strict time limit, but there are already 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 people who are signed up. There are probably more people online. There are another 3 people on this list who might not be on the first list of 13. And so we all need to be respectful of everybody else's time and desire to communicate their concerns to the town council. So I would ask that you not be repetitive, that you get your comments out there. And if you heard someone else who made similar comments, if you can, note that and limit yours as much as possible so that we can all make sure that everybody has an opportunity to be heard today.
We've had close to 300 emails on this. Are they going to be read into the record here?
Not by me.
I'm going to do it.
Or they will be added to the record in some way, though?
You can certainly do that if you want to. I don't think you have, this is a public hearing where it's not really a public hearing. It's not required for any part of the process or anything. It's just an input gathering mechanism that the town council is using to determine whether or not it ultimately wants to go forward with this project. And there may be some actual public hearings along the way about various different things that come up, like taxing structure, special MSDs and things like that might have to have their own actual public hearings. But this is an opportunity for you to gather information. So however you want to put out information in the record is up to the council. If the council wants those emails to be part of the minutes, you could ask for that. But they're going to be public record either way.
Well, those 300 plus or minus emails is going to take half a ream of paper at least. So I'm just wondering if we can enter them into the record at some point, at least digitally.
That's a good question for staff, for Sheila, for Wes.
And you could certainly,
They're already included.
you could certainly publish them on I think y'all have a beach nourishment page on your website. You could certainly publish them all as one thing. And that actually solves another problem. If someone requests that information, if it's already published on your website,
Okay.
you don't have to go through and make copies and stuff for people. You just tell them where it is, and the statute says you don't have to make any additional copies for folks. All right. Any other questions from council before I go?
No, let's get moving.
Okay, and for the folks who are online and wish to speak to this, if you can send Ms. Kane a message via the chat mechanism on Zoom, that would be the way to get your name on the list. And Ms. Kane, do you have any idea how many people are already? Nobody's signed up. Thank you. And I will check with her again when I get to the end of the written list. So the first person to speak is Catherine Edwards. Yes, ma'am. If you could come to the podium, state your name, state your address, and provide your comments. Thank you.
Yes, I'm Catherine Edwards. I have a house at 3 First Avenue. It's beachfront property, and I've owned the property for over 20 years. And I am firmly in favor of beach nourishment. I've watched the erosion over the years to the point this year there's hardly any beach even to walk on, and that's during non-storm times. So I'd like to say I put some written comments in, and I appreciate your question as to the written comments being part of the record as well. The bottom line is I am willing to pay my fair share of increased taxes or whatever it takes to do this beach nourishment project. My sister lives at Virginia Beach. It was very successful there, and we are desperately in need of it here in Southern Shores. So that's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's Paul, is it Schaefer or Sufer?
Close. Soifer.
Surfer. Thank you. Paul. If I pronounce all those names wrong, I apologize. Ms. Schurzman can attest that I'm not very good at names for 3 or 4 years. After 3 or 4 years of saying them, I'll catch up and usually get them right. She says I got it right this time.
Thanks for this opportunity. My name is Paul Soifer, and I own a couple houses over on First Avenue. And I guess I have not really done a lot of research in the background of the fact that, I went ahead and, scoped out the results of the nourishment down there in Kitty Hawk recently, just to kind of get an idea of how that's weathered over the last several years. And it's kind of, beach comes and goes. However, we are a destination. Southern Shores is a special place. And really, I think the questions that I would have going forward, and certainly that won't be answered here today, is the overall scope of the project, whether it's going to go ahead and include all of Southern Shores. I know that there's been some discussion about cutting it off at certain avenues and not taking it all the way up to Duck. So I think in fairness, it has to be considered kind of an all-in-one for the folks of Southern Shores, either in or out. And then also as far as the funding, I know that there's been some money that's been appropriated on a co-op basis. I don't know if that's a one-time or what the time limit is on the expiration of that funding, but I'm also curious as to the assessments, how the assessments would be arranged or arrived at, and if that's a one-time deal or that's going to go ahead and be spread over the course of some years of the project. So that's my input at this time, and I do thank you for this opportunity.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Mark Mansfield.
Good morning. Mr. Mayor and honorable members of council, my name is Mark Mansfield. I live at 244 Sea Oaks Trail. We've been property owners here for 10 years, and I have greatly enjoyed that period of time. So as I mentioned, we are residential property owners, and we have been here for quite a number of years, and we're responding to the postcard that we recently received in the mail. The decision to embark on long-term beach nourishment is one which involves many considerations. In that connection, the site offered for our review in your postcard contains information regarding engineering and design. Equally important are economic, environmental, and social considerations. I'm not going to read all of my comments. I think they were provided by email on June the 10th. I would ask, as the other speaker requested, that they be made part of the record. So in addition to those comments that we provided, there was a reference in the postcard to an additional $100 to around $3,000 to your tax bill listed in the postcard. We are not prepared to offer a response until our previous concerns are addressed. If these values, as stated, are annual charges, we would have a hard time supporting long-term beach nourishment as is currently presented. So as a point of clarification, is that amount a one-time fee? Is it spread out over the life of a beach nourishment? Or is it something that each property owner needs to look at as an annual charge? It was not clear in the postcard as to how that fee, what period of time that it would cover. So again, thank you for the opportunity to provide comment, and I look forward to hearing what others have to say.
Thank you. Paul Borsellino.
Thank you. You did fine with my name. Thank you. Before I talk about beach nourishment, I just have to say to council and to Mr. Mayor, thank you very much for taking a quick action and a decisive action about this traffic situation. Like everybody else has said, it's already been an unbelievable spring in terms of traffic. And from my looking at it, we're going to have the busiest summer that we've ever had for traffic. Somebody mentioned the Forbes magazine article. There's the Netflix movie, Outer Banks, even though it's not too accurate. That's all more interest. People don't want to get on an airplane. I've been talking to tourists on my street, and I just think we need to figure that we're going to have the busiest summer that we've ever had. So thank you for taking an action about more no left turn weekends. It's not going to be enough, but it's a good start. Okay, I'm Paul Borsellino, 16 7th Ave, speaking about beach nourishment. I've spoken to you multiple times and sent in multiple emails in favor of beach nourishment. I remain in favor of beach nourishment, and I couldn't be stronger in favor of beach nourishment, even with the added tax burden that it will put upon all of us. I'm also a member of a Facebook group that has over 100 members on it who are in favor of beach nourishment and are willing to pay higher taxes for it. The beach brings the tourists. A beautiful wide beach brings more tourists. Tourists bring revenue. More tourists bring more revenue. That revenue keeps our taxes relatively lower, keeps them down. It keeps services up, keeps property values up. As the beach continues to shrink, so will the number of tourists coming. So will the revenue. How do we know the beach is shrinking? You've spent lots of money and looked at lots of studies by Aptum, and they're pretty accurate about predicting the condition of the dunes. You've recently asked them to do more about the size of the usable beach, the dry beach. They've done better about that. But what I can tell you about the dry beach, because I've been volunteering with Joel Newton from the Southern Shores Civic Association, this year he had to repair, we, the volunteers, had to repair 5 or 6 of the crossovers, the wooden deck crossovers that go to the beach. It was the worst winter of having to repair those crossovers. I don't mean a step or two at the bottom. On 7th Ave where I live, you got to the bottom of the steps, there was a 36-inch drop at the bottom of the steps. We had to add 4 steps onto that. Just this past year, we added 2 more steps. So that's been 6 steps added on 7th Ave. There have been 5 or 6 other crossovers that had to be added to. And by the way, if you go out and look at those crossovers and you try to figure out how much has been added, You just look and you say, oh, there's some new wood there. I can see there were some added steps. Don't use that as your full analysis, because he and the contractor were able to use some of the old wood. So it might look like there hasn't been much added to it. But several of the crossovers even had to be rebuilt because they were so damaged from the erosion this year. Does beach nourishment work? The issue's been brought up by multiple people that it doesn't work. It does work. Look at Nag's Head. Look at the parts of Duck that were nourished. Look at Kitty Hawk. Kitty Hawk, where the houses were falling into the beach. Now it's a beautiful dune. They're going to nourish some more. It does work. It's not a waste of money. Look at other towns on beachfront like we are. They're all nourishing. It does work. It is a long-term project. I think it's worth the investment. Thank you very much for the opportunity to talk about beach nourishment. And again, thanks a lot for what you did about the no left turn weekends. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Hey, we've written some questions, which we have people who possibly answer those questions here on Zoom, I think. We know Ken's here, and we know that DEC are here. Do you think it's worth trying to answer some of these individuals' questions as they're asked, or wait and try to get them all at the end?
I think it's probably better to go ahead and get them at the end. I think if Mr. Wilson and the others who may be able to answer them are keeping track of the questions as we go along, at the end, I'll give it back to you, Mr. Mayor, and then you can have a discussion among the council and the various people who may be able to answer questions and see if we can get some more answers for people.
Okay, that's fine.
I think
everyone hear that?
I think if we do it as we go along, it's gonna, we could be here for a lot more time when they can probably compile the questions and do it at the end in a simpler fashion.
Thank you.
Jack Warner. I might have gotten that one wrong. Jack, W-O-H-N-E-R. Okay, you think he spoke at public comment? Okay. James Wilder. Anybody see James Wilder? All right. Mr. Albert spoke earlier. Did he leave? Okay. Martin Miller.
Thanks for the opportunity to comment on beach nourishment. I'm a builder down here, and I have had the opportunity, grateful opportunity, to build, own, and sell 3 oceanfronts here in Southern Shores. And my wife and I currently own an oceanfront in Southern Shores. I'll tell you, what's across that dune is what sustained the property values of those properties that we built, owned, and sold. So I am overwhelmingly in support of beach nourishment. There's a couple of other comments I wanted to make. I was in corporate finance for 37 years of my life before I came down here and decided I wanted to do something different. And I don't know if any of you have been paying attention to what's happening in the credit markets. But as I look at how Southern Shores is evaluating financing this beach nourishment, obviously there's going to be some co-op at the county, possibly the state, obviously some tax assessments. But I'm guessing, I don't know this for sure, but I'm guessing you're going to have to issue some bonds as well, whether they be general obligation or specific obligation bonds. And I got to tell you, in my 57 years here, there has never been a time in my lifetime when the credit markets were as good as they are now. So you guys have the opportunity to access cash that's almost being given away. The cost of that cash is almost nil. I don't know if any of you listened to the Senate hearings as well as the House Finance Committee hearings this week where Jerome Powell, Chairman of the Federal Reserve, was speaking to those committees. But he's talking about doing yield caps. I don't know if any of you know what yield caps are. But basically what's happening is Federal Reserve is getting ready to go into the markets and start purchasing 2, 7, and 10-year Treasury bonds, as well as corporate bonds, which is unprecedented. They've never done that before. So what are they trying to do by doing that? Basically, you go in and buy something, you create demand. I'll put it in the form of selling a house. If you got a house for sale, you got 10 people lined up to buy it, what's going to happen? The price of the house is going to go up. Well, the same thing's going to happen as they create demand for these credit instruments. The price of those instruments is going to go up in the market. What that means, when the price goes up, the yield on those assets goes down. You got Federal Reserve rates, overnight rates right now at between 0 and 0.25%, which is what the banks are borrowing money overnight to lend all of us. You got 30-year mortgage rates at the lowest ever in any of our lifetimes right now. Well, with the Federal Reserve and what they're getting ready to do with yield caps, you're going to be able to enter the credit markets and issue bonds, whether they're specific obligations, general obligations, at money that's at unprecedented levels. So you'll be able to do this at almost no cost in terms of what the town's going to have to bear, and therefore the tax burden we're going to have to pass on. But in any event, my wife and I are wholly in support of this, just like Cal are willing to pay our fair share. And if there's anything I can do to help, I spent 37 years in corporate finance. I'd be willing to stand and help you guys in credit lines.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Kevin Whaley.
Morning, my name's Kevin Whale, 86 South Dogwood. Just throw my comment about the sidewalk. Thank you very much. We love it. Beach Nourishment, my wife and I are in favor of it. And we're concerned about the card that went out. One gentleman already asked this question, is it 1 year or is it every year? It's a question we have. And also we're in favor of a tier approach. We don't believe those people that live 4 or 5 blocks from the beach should bear the same burden as those on the beach, or that benefit from the beach financially. Thank you for your time.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Ms. Scherzman.
Good morning again, everyone. Ann Scherdsma. I'm here as not the resident homeowner of 69 Hickory Trail, but as a co-owner of multiple oceanfront properties. I co-own with my siblings and with my 96-year-old mother. We have 3 oceanfront properties in what Ken Wilson referred to as the main placement area. It is not in Seacrest Village, very different beach where we are. 2 of our oceanfront properties are vacant, undeveloped. We did not intend to develop them in my lifetime. Mr. Miller didn't specify where his oceanfront is, but I would guess that it's north of First Avenue. I may be wrong. I'm here representing my family and myself, and we are opposed to beach nourishment as it is currently being proposed. We do not see any need for it where we are. I cannot say anything about First Avenue, 7th Avenue, 13th Avenue. That's a different part of the beach. That's a different southern shore from the southern shores that I've known for 50 years. From my perspective of 50 years, I don't see much diminishment of the beach. At 174 Ocean Boulevard, at 144 Ocean Boulevard, at 231 Ocean Boulevard. We have multiple properties in that main placement area. We have a family rental cottage that was built in 1971, right in the middle of that area. We have never had a summer season when it wasn't solidly booked. Tourists will always come here, Paul, always. They always have. The beach is in good shape where we are. We've never heard renters say that it wasn't in good shape and that they were going to travel somewhere else in order to find a better beach. So we are opposed to beach nourishment as it is currently proposed. If you want to look at the south end and the north end as separate from the main placement area, that's a different story. My belief as far as the taxes is concerned is you're talking about an annual assessment there. And we're looking at quite a considerable payment every month. Every year during this beach nourishment process. I also have to say something about these studies that have been done by Aptum and that I'm guessing that most of you in the audience have not read. Between 2006 and 2017, there was no beach assessment of the Southern Shore shoreline. The last one was 2006 when the Army Corps of Engineers did it. Aptum came along and did a baseline study, in 2017, the conclusion was shoreline is stable. It's only lost 5 inches between 2006 and 2017. There's plenty of sand in the system, no big rush to jump on beach nourishment. That was what Aptum said after a 2017 survey. Then it went off and did a vulnerability assessment in which it used a design storm model. And it asked, what kind of storm damage reduction would we have to do if Southern Shores were hit by an Isabel-like hurricane? So he came up with his proposal, these beach nourishment options, based on how much sand would have to be added to the beach in Southern Shores if we had a very unlikely occurrence of an Isabel hurricane. Southern Shores have not had a severe storm since 1962, the Ash Wednesday storm. Isabel fizzled out before it got to Southern Shores, and there are reasons for that. Storms are more scattered at the northern end of the Outer Banks than they are at the southern end. More needs to be understood about our beach, our environment, and what we are going to face in the future. What Ken Wilson came up with was beach recommendations. He said they're totally discretionary. We don't need to do what we're, the beach nourishment, and it's based on what if we have an Isabel-like storm. We have to provide, quote, a sufficient or acceptable level of storm damage reduction in the event of a severe storm, end quote, that is not likely to ever occur. You can't eyeball the shoreline and say, oh my, we have erosion, we're going to have problems. You have to know what's going on in the environment. You have to know what changes are going on. The width of the beach changes from season to season, from year to year. But over time, Southern Shores is stable. If you look at the long-term average erosion rates in the past 76 years, 6 inches per year for Southern Shores. And that's over a 76-year period. Again, I don't know what's happening in the Seacrest Village, but I know where I am and the beach that I've known for 50 years, there's not considerable erosion, there's not considerable narrowing, there's not a need for the kind of expenditure that we're talking about. And I believe a general obligation bond should have been considered. If you're going to go ahead, this council should consider that approach. It never even bothered. It didn't do a referendum. It's doing a referendum now. But people are not educated about the proposals that have been presented by Aptum, which is now going under another corporate name. We are a different beach than any of the others to the south of us or to the north of us. We develop differently. We have a different history. We don't have commercial property on our ocean front to take up a lot of the costs like they have in Nags Head and Kitty Hawk, Hill Devil Hills. We've never ever lost any structures to any storms, not since the 1962 Ash Wednesday storm. Many of our structures are built well back of the ocean. That's what my dad did in 1971. Were built behind a very nice dune that was established after the 1962 storm. So I'm opposed to the way things are presented now. I would support beach nourishment. I would pay my share if I believed in it, if I believed it was for the good of everybody. And I do think, I like the gentleman who talked about the tier approach. Everybody benefits in this town from this ocean front. Everybody benefits from this tourist economy. You don't have to be located or have property on the ocean front to benefit. Southern Shores obviously wouldn't exist without the ocean front and the tourist economy. I would ask you all to reconsider this proposal and look at really where is the damage on this beach? Because if we're just going ahead with a proposal based on this design storm model of Isabel-like hurricane, that's nonsense. That's not good critical thinking. And it's certainly not environmental science. Thank you very much. I appreciate your indulgence.
Thank you. David Curtis.
I signed up to accident.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Charles Andrews.
I'm Charlie Andrews, and I live over on the west side. Point Comfort Lane. So I don't really have a horse in this race in terms of having property on the water. And from what I understand about bracketing who pays what according to where they're located, I think that's fair and makes sense. But we've had a round of this beach nourishment, and what are the results of all that? Is there some kind of analysis or study that's been done that would indicate that this is what was gained, this is how long it lasted, what is the forecast for years to come about how much we're going to have to do this, or are we simply just moving to the next phase as it was understood that this would be going on for years and years? So maybe mine is more of a question than a comment. Is there something out there that shows what we've accomplished so far and why that justifies the next round? Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Ms. Kane, is there anyone who's online?
Excuse me, I didn't know there was a sign-up sheet.
I'm going to come back at the end and ask anyone who hadn't spoken, but I'm going to go ahead and get the online folks done before I come and ask for a final.
I also have one.
Yeah. Ms. Kane, if you.
Hi, yes, thanks very much. My name's Ken Fisher. My wife and I own a house in, can you hear me okay?
Not very well. If you can speak as loud as you can, that'd be great. Ms. Kane's adjusting the volume, but we can barely hear you.
Okay, sorry, I'll try and speak a little louder. My wife and I own a property on 7th Avenue with my neighbor Paul, who was there earlier. We are not fortunate enough to be full-time residents yet. We hope to be at some point in the future. We've owned that house about 20 years, and I'm also part owner in my parents' home, which they built in 1970 on Wax Myrtle. Been coming to Southern Shores a long time. The previous commenter said something about this being round 2. I'm not aware that there's ever been any beach nourishment done in Southern Shores. If I'm not correct, I'd love to understand that. In my lifetime, I don't ever remember that happening. Anyway, I've emailed some comments. I don't want to repeat them. I just appreciate the chance to be heard. I appreciate the chance for you to make these meetings available. I live in Colorado and can't always get out there for the critical meeting. So I'd like to say thank you. And my last point is I own 2 properties. I'm willing to pay the taxes, and neither of them are oceanfront, and I'm hoping they remain non-oceanfront property for the rest of my life. I'd like the oceanfront to be protected, and the people who are on the ocean, they keep their houses. So thank you very much.
Yes, sir. Thank you. What was that name, Sheila? Hyam Gardle. Are you on the Zoom and wish to talk? Going once, going twice. Is there anybody else on the list, Ms. King? I can't see it. No. Yeah, I'm behind the monitor, and the one across the room is maybe.
States the concern from our family is that the entire town benefits from the beach. Therefore, it is only fair that any tax or cost be distributed evenly among all property owners. Oceanfront properties are already incurring extra costs and assessments, and they should not be shared with others.
Okay, and Ms. King, who was that?
That
Okay. And is that all we have for comments? All right. And so I'm going to go around the room first. This gentleman, if you could come to the podium.
My name is John Price. I live at 176 Ocean. Mr. Mayor, members of council, thanks for making this happen. I've sent some comments in, and I think I get the award for having the house closest to the ocean in Southern Shores. I'm in My back room is in the dune. It's not near the dune or close to the dune. That's 176. That's next to 174, which has severe erosion. I put up sand fence. Thank God I did. The scalloping on my beach is really bad. I've only owned my home 2 years, but I've been here. I think I was conceived here. All of the children in my family are born 9 months after July. I think this is a critical thing. I think that if we did what I said in my notes was, we can do nothing and say, God, we should have done something, or we can do something, hope for the best. If the way it works out, we'll be glad we did it. I'm more than happy to pay more being on the ocean, although I do agree with others that say everybody benefits from the beach. That's okay. People that own oceanfront property pay a lot for it unless they inherited it. So I think if you have to pay a little bit more, it's the price of admission, oceanfront. But we have to do something. It is shrinking. I did some quick math on some numbers that were given out earlier. And even at 6 inches a year, or 3 inches a year over 72 years, I think it's 36 feet. Whatever the case may be, it's shrinking. There is a change just in the 2 years that I've had my home. This year's really scary, and this morning it was really bad. But, from my opinion and others that I've talked to, people that are on social networking, neighbors that I talk to when I walk, it's an important thing. And if we're going to preserve the most important asset, I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that I've taken every action I can. Just like protecting my family, protecting my home, I want to protect my part of Southern Shores. Thank you very much for your time.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
All right, last call. Anybody else in the audience? We've got one over here. Is there anybody else that I'm going to be looking for after this? All right. You're the last one, sir.
I've got one here.
Oh, and
I've got to read this one.
Mr. Bennett has one that Mayor Bennett has one to read.
Good morning, my name is Amy Beckler. I'm from 170 Beach Street Trails. Thanks for the opportunity. Sorry. I would like the council to also explore this consideration to maybe set up a reserve fund for future beach nourishment so that the cost of beach nourishment be spread over time, over the next 40 years maybe, because it's not going to be a one-time event. So establish a reserve fund, and if it needs to be increased, you need to increase taxes to stiffen this reserve fund, then it's needed so that it's spread over time period. I just also want to make a comment. Mr. Price made a comment earlier there in the foyer, which I think is very good. It's about the left turn on the highway to maybe use big vehicles like a school bus instead of all these drums, or maybe a combination of the two. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Good idea.
Put an Abrams tank up there and take care of it.
It costs more to replace a school bus than to replace a barrel, though.
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor.
You don't have to store them because you're.
That's true.
Put a
Mr. Mayor, I think that's everybody.
We have one that's.
Yeah, I was going to give it back to him
The
to.
one I've got?
Yes, sir.
All right. I didn't lose it. I mean the paperwork. For the June 16th public hearing on beach nourishment, I asked the town council postpone any decision on beach nourishment until we better understand the basis of CPE NC beach nourishment proposal. This is, this is from Mr. Joe Van Giesen, 228 North Dogwood Trail. Excuse me. There have been two types of valuations of beach erosion submitted to the town. Number one, empirical measurements of actual beach profiles taken over the past several decades, including one presented to the town on March 2018 by APTIM, now known as Coastal Planning and Engineering of North Carolina. and theoretical model predictions about future beach profiles based on assumptions of storm conditions and application of beach nourishment. On March the 6th, 2018, based on actual beach profile measurements, Apton's report stated that Apton determined that one, the Southern Shore shoreline is stable, having lost only 0.4 of a foot, that's 5 inches, between 2006 and 2017, and two, the volume of sand in the system has actually increased during the same period. Mr. Wilson of Apton also told the council at the March 2018 meeting that the shoreline is looking fairly stable. There's no big rush to jump on beach nourishment. In spite of those recommendations and based only on their theoretical model, CPE-NC has proposed a beach nourishment project to be conducted at Southern Shores. The town is considering approving this very expensive investment and restructuring our property tax structure based on a theoretical model about which the town seems to know absolutely nothing and has taken no steps toward achieving any understanding of the model.
I think it was read. They called me, but they butchered my name. I wasn't really paying attention, but they read my statement.
You who that was.
It is in CPE North Carolina's best interest. They stand to gain several $100,000 in revenue for the town to embark on beach nourishment project, on this beach nourishment project, with CPE-NC as the project manager. CPE-NC therefore has an actual conflict of interest in the outcome of their proposal at Southern Shores to undertake beach nourishment. I've recommended more than once that the town employ independent experts to conduct a review and evaluation of CPE-NC's prediction model. An evaluation of the model should include not only the model's theoretical basis, but also the model's assumptions about storm conditions. The town may be betting up to $16 million on the accuracy and reliability of the model, depending on how much financial assistance we receive from Dare County or the state of North Carolina. I am unaware of any effort of the town staff or town council to compare previous predictions made by CPE-NC for the Outer Banks towns to the actual erosion or accretion at beaches where beach nourishment projects were conducted based on CPE-NC's model predictions. I recommend that in addition to the review of the model by experts, that the town request an updated list of towns where the CPE-NC model has been used to design completed beach nourishment projects, and then conduct a survey of those towns to learn about the results of those projects. Until the CPE-NC model is validated by independent reviewers and the results of beach nourishment projects designed using that model are understood, it would be risky to continue any discussion or consideration of beach nourishment projects in Southern Shores. Please postpone any decisions on beach nourishment at Southern Shores until we can be more confident that the predictions made by the CPE-NC model be more confident in the predictions made by the CPE-NC model, and we have a better understanding of their beach nourishment record at other Outer Banks towns. Joe Van Giesen, 228 North Dogwood Trail. Thank you. That's it. I'm through.
I'd already given it back to you, Mr. Mayor. I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't get that.
Thank you. I was
Thank you.
distracted.
Well, obviously, I was too.
Mr. Mayor, may I request a short recess? May I request a short recess?
You certainly may, Elizabeth. Anybody all concerned, 10-minute recess? Be back here at 11 o'clock.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Don't have any microphone. Yeah, now I do. It's got a built-in delay. It works perfectly. We'll now reconvene today's meeting. A question that came up earlier, just a few minutes ago, about the timing for the barrels for this week, this coming weekend. 11, what did we decide? 11 to 7? 11 to 8.
11 to 8.
11 to 8. Does that answer your question, David? Thank you. So where are we, Council? I think where we left off was asking Ken Wilson and the Carters, too, if they have had an opportunity to hear some of the questions they'd like to answer them at this time. Ken, I'd call on you first if you're available.
Sure. Can everybody hear me all right?
Yes.
All right, great. Well, it's good to be with you all this morning. Yeah, I was taking some notes. I actually had a computer crash when I think Mr. Mansfield was talking. So I don't know if he had some specific questions. By the time I got my computer back popped up, the next gentleman was talking about some recent repairs that they had made to crossovers. So if anybody, if there was, some sort of a question specifically that I can answer there, I'd be happy to answer it. I just had some technical difficulties there. The first thing that I'd written down is one of the folks in the original public comment had asked about, verifying some of this with the field research facility. We've talked about this in the past, and I'd just say, we use a lot of the models. In fact, the S-Beach model that we've talked about that's were commented on by some of the folks was actually a model that was developed by the Corps of Engineers, by their engineering research division. So we're working very much in concert with the field research facility staff. We had a meeting maybe 3 weeks ago with their modeling staff up there about some of the work that we're proposing to do for the 4 towns moving forward. So, just to kind of dissuade some of the concerns about, there's this great knowledge base there close to your area that we're not using. I would say, we're absolutely using and coordinating very much with the experts there at the field research facility. I guess one way of kind of stepping through this, there were some questions and comments about the methods that we'd used, just real general, as kind of a refresher. When we were first called in to take a look at the entire town after, we had stepped in and helped out with the hotspot down in the southern area of the beach prior to the 2017 construction project, we went ahead and proposed doing a full survey of the entire beach, the entire town of Southern Shores, beach profiles about every 1,000 feet. And what we had found by comparing that data with the Corps of Engineers 2006 data was that, for the most part, looking at the town of Southern Shores, the erosion rates, the shoreline change rates, the volume change rates were relatively stable as to some of the changes that we'd seen in other towns that we had worked in Dare County. So that was a positive, positive situation to have. The one thing I would say about looking at data that's back at 2006, we really don't know what's happened in between there. So it's possible that, between 2006 and 2017, there was somewhat of a buildup of the shoreline, an accretional trend, and then, maybe for the last 3 or 4 years in certain areas, there has been a pullback. And I mean, we've certainly heard lots of anecdotal information of folks that spend a lot more time up there on the beach than I do, talking about certain areas being stable, certain areas being, erosive, certain areas, retreating faster than they've ever seen it before. So we're, in looking at 2 bookends of 2006 and 2017, we have to kind of consider, okay, well, we've got a long-term trend, but we also, this isn't the full story. We don't know what happened in between that, and if we're in some sort of a more short-term, loss or gain trend. So after we provided those original results, there was some discussion about using the storm vulnerability model that had been used in the town of Duck, the town of Killable Hills, and the town of Kitty Hawk to take a different look at, the vulnerability of those oceanfront homes. One of the things that we saw when we looked at the profiles is that when we compared the volume, we used the term, I think we used the term like the profile envelope, the beach profile envelope of how much volume is basically in the system from the minus 24-foot contour all the way to the backside of the dune. And we use that, for lack of a better metric, just to compare one profile to the other to see how much volume was there. And when we looked at just the average, the areas that had the relatively less amount of volume per linear foot was really in that central section, that main fill section. And just by looking at Google Earth, you could tell that the houses in those sections were actually situated closer to the dry sand beach than some of the houses in the northern part of the town and the southern part of the town. So that sort of qualitative assessment led us to recommending that vulnerability assessment that allows us to do a little bit more of a quantitative assessment. So we ran through that, and the results were basically that using that storm that was used for some of the other towns to evaluate vulnerability, we were looking at that central section of the town as the most vulnerable in terms of storm vulnerability. Now, there were some comments made about, the Hurricane Isabel wasn't that big of a deal in Southern Shores. It impacted, towns further to the south, towns further to the north. With every one of these hurricanes, you guys know it living right there on the coast. Every single hurricane is different. Every single one has a signature. The speed that it approaches, the angle that it comes in, where it comes on shore. All of these things impact what the actual what the actual impacts are going to be for these ocean communities. So we looked at this one particular storm to kind of give us a general understanding of the vulnerability. Again, trying to be transparent, trying to look at things in a similar fashion of how we've evaluated things for your neighbors. And we came up with this assessment that was basically showing us that the most vulnerable section was that central 10,000 foot portion of the town. So we developed, some general volumes so that we could come up with cost estimates for what it would take to provide a comparable level of storm vulnerability mitigation in that section as what we had done for Duck and for Kill Devil Hills. And those were the first numbers that we had provided. And then in 2019, when we redid the beach profile surveys, we went ahead and conducted that analysis again using updated information, because now we had, not only did we have that 2006 and 2017 data, but now we could compare short-term trend 2017 to 2019. And so we were starting to get a little bit more recent understanding of how things were changing. And we actually saw that in at least the southern section of the town, we had some relatively higher volumetric losses, rates of loss in that section. So we went back, we used that new profile data to update our volumes that we would need to provide that level of storm vulnerability, looking at some of the volume changes down in that southern section of town, modifying our recommendations based on those rates. And then finally, the last step in coming up with the latest iteration of alternatives was, public interest in potentially doing something up in the northern section of town, where even though the vulnerability analysis doesn't show that there's necessarily, the Hurricane Isabel storm would cause significant impacts up in that northern section. It's well known that section is a very thin section of beach, that some of the dunes are scarping up in that area. We actually had some survey crews up there in the last week, and they'll tell you firsthand that driving through that section on the beach is very difficult. It's an issue with, for the emergency responders that work on the beach up there. It's an issue for folks that are trying to vacation up there at high tide and spend some time on the beach. So we incorporated that additional aspect of a project into our formulation to be able to provide, a quote unquote, sufficient usable beach in that northern section. And that's how we got to the latest proposal where we are today. Where we are right now, these are some options. The proposal that the town has in front of them requires some additional engineering analysis. The plan as it stands right now could change. Part of what we're proposing is also some offshore borrow area investigations. There's a reason to believe that there could be some sand resources that are closer to the Southern Shores Kitty Hawk project, which could bring the cost down. There's a number of factors that are weighing on the situation out there as far as funding. The town has put in for a grant through the state. That amount of money could impact what can and can't be done. Obviously, there's an expectation of cost sharing by the county. Depending on how that goes, things could go one way or another. So what we've provided is basically a proposal that says if the town believes that beach nourishment is in their future and they'd like to be in a position to potentially construct a project in this 2022 timeframe when the other 3 towns are going to go to construction, that now is the time that we need to start moving forward with the environmental permitting, the offshore sand resource investigations, the engineering design, to put yourself in a position to where if the funding is where it needs to be, that you could build a project in 2022 and participate in the multi-town project. So, I mean, I guess at that, I'd kind of take a breath and see if any council there think that there are some specific questions that were asked that I haven't addressed, and kind of rehashing sort of how we've gotten here. And again, just want to stress this idea of transparency. I realize that all of our time is valuable, and that these reports take some time to read through, but we really work hard to try to put these in terms that are understandable to council and the general public up there, that you can read through these and ask questions. And I certainly understand the skepticism that everyone has right now with anybody that calls themselves an expert. I mean, automatically my red flags go up and say, well, what do I need to be thinking about? This expert's trying to tell me something. What are they trying to sell me? What are they trying to get me to do? And I mean, that's just the nature of where we are right now. I just say that, if you ask us a fair question, we're certainly going to give you a fair answer. So if there are some things specifically that we haven't gone through, please voice those questions, and I'd be happy to take them on one at a time.
Go ahead, Wes.
Good morning, Ken. This is Wes. There was one question that came up towards the end that I recall about the performance of the Pelican Watch project that was completed. Can you provide any comments that you may have on that?
Sure. Like I said, we just conducted the last survey this past week, so we don't have those 2020 data. The 2019 data showed that the area right at the boundary looked like it was doing pretty well. The area that is at the northern section of where that Pelicans Watch project was, that and moving north about 3,000 feet was one of the areas where we saw some of the highest erosion rates going on in that section. Haven't really put our finger into why it looks like there's that trend there in that specific section. Just taking a look at it each time we're up there. We have a lot of photos. Anytime any of us are in the area, we're up there on the pier there taking pictures north and south. But certainly the dune there is fairly stable. You certainly see some pullback and some pushback depending on the weather patterns that have come through recently on how wide that dry sand beach is there. But the dune itself appears to be holding up pretty well. It is at the very end of that project, so a lot of times when we see some issues, we do see issues at the northern and southern limits of where these projects go in, as we're seeing material diffuse off of the project, or end losses as we call them sometimes. But that section in Pelican Watch, specifically the dune, appears to be performing very well.
Elizabeth.
Thank you, Ken. Anything else you want to share with us?
Elizabeth's got a question.
Can I ask one question?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry.
There was another comment from one of our public attendees who asked about analysis of the overall effectiveness of previous projects. And I guess if you have any, if there are any peer-reviewed published papers that have that kind of information? Could you make some recommendations for references and maybe we can make that available?
Yeah, I'd have to look into, I mean, specifically peer reviewed, I'd have to look into, you know, some databases, some libraries and things like that. I can talk to some of my colleagues about those types of things. You know, I know that, you know, some of our colleagues have published on projects in other states and things like that. I mean, there's a fairly long record of the monitoring reports that we've done for the beach towns up in Dare County. Certainly a long list of monitoring reports that have been done for the Nags Head project, which has now been initially constructed in 2011 and renourished, I guess this past year, 2018, 2019, something like that. But you know, there's certainly a long record of how things are going. One of the commenters mentioned about the town of Kitty Hawk. There are a couple of hotspot areas that we're dealing with based on offshore topography that we're looking at trying to better mitigate this through this upcoming cycle. But in general, you know, that starter dune is holding up very well in the town of Kitty Hawk. Still a pretty wide dry sand beach in much of the area. The town of Duck, that's our shortest project up there. The project's only about 1.5 miles long, and we know, you know, from the way these projects work, that the shorter the project, the more end losses you're going to have. That area was also the highest fill density, which means, you know, we put more sand per linear foot than any of the other projects that were built back in 2017. We have seen that dry sand beach peel back, you know, a pretty good amount. The dune, for the most part, which provides the most protection, is still fairly well intact. We've seen some scarping at the base of that, but a lot of the analysis that we're going to be doing over the next 6 months for the town of Duck is looking into how to improve the initial performance of that project. So all of these projects, when you you can use all of the latest and greatest technology, all of the formulas and models that have been developed over the years, but every area is different, and we cannot predict what what future weather conditions are going to be. So we do our best to design these projects so that they'll withstand the conditions we expect. Sometimes we get conditions that are a little bit different than that. Sometimes some of the physical principles that occur out there are a little bit different than what we had anticipated. And that's why we do so much monitoring of these projects. You know, we build a project, we monitor it every year. And then when the time comes to put additional sand out there, we're using that data to improve on the design time after time. That's sort of the adaptive management strategy that's inherent in all of these beach nourishment projects. They're successful projects that have been around for 50 years that the Corps of Engineers has been doing. But those projects didn't start out as a success the very first time they put sand on the beach. They monitored and learned things as they went, and have improved the project as we go along. So a lot of the plan moving forward for Kildable Hills and Kitty Hawk and Duck really looks at, over that next 6 months, taking all that data that we've developed and looking at, you know, individual modifications that can be made in each one of these projects to improve the performance over the next 5 years.
So we have a question, or I have a question about a recent email that we got from Wes that included a contract from Ken Wilson's firm.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to talk about that now, or is he going to stay with us and we can talk about it?
Is this a discussion about authorizing a budget amendment?
Mm-hmm.
And the last word I had from that yesterday was that we need to move forward with this. And I would ask the question again: can we delay this until our next meeting?
Yeah. So Ken, we wanted to ask if there's anything in your proposal that can't wait until our July 7th meeting.
I mean, we've pushed things off, and I mean, you know, I understand the gravity of the decision. I'd say our preference would be to start moving forward. My one concern, I guess, is that, you know, it's stated a couple of times in the proposal that a lot of the costs that are being borne for the environmental permitting, documentation, the sediment resource evaluations, even some of the numerical modeling that's being used for all 4 towns in combination is being cost shared by the other 3 towns. And so if there is a decision ultimately that, and the other towns, they understand the situation that you all are in, and that, they're basically a cycle ahead of you. They've gone through all of these public discussions and better understand the situation now that they've been through it. They understand the time that it takes to make these decisions. But, depending on what happens with Southern Shores, if you all decide that what's best for you is to postpone a project, for another several years or something like that, then there will be cost implications on those other towns. And I'd say the sooner that we understand that, the better we could mitigate some of those, some of those costs for the other towns. The longer this goes by, I mean, Kill Double Hills and Kitty Hawk have both already approved their contract. I believe the Duck contract is on the agenda for tomorrow for their meeting. So, I mean, in the grand scheme of things and these larger term schedules, a couple of weeks, it isn't going to make or break things, but, it is urgent that a decision be made, sooner than later, so that if the decision for Southern Shores is not to pursue this project, that we can work with the other 3 towns to try to mitigate some of those additional costs that they'll need to bear.
Yeah, we're definitely in a unique position here in Southern Shores in a lot of different ways, traffic being one of them. But anyway, we're also unique in that we're getting a brand new town manager, and his first day is not until June the 24th. So there's some desire amongst some council members, myself included, if it's not going to put undue duress on the process, if we could allow our council to have interaction with our new town manager on this very issue. And it's nice that he already has, experience with the beach nourishment project or 2. That's just something I thought about that would be nice. I would appreciate it.
I had that same conversation with Matt and discussing that same issue, and I'm inclined to feel that I agree with you that we should maybe wait till it lifts on board. No reflection on Wes or his effort.
No, not at all.
That's kind of where we are with this, Ken. I guess the question is, can you live with that till our June meeting, our July meeting? Sorry.
I mean, we'll continue to work with you guys in any way that we can. I mean, I understand the desire to wait for the new town manager. That makes sense to me, and we will do our best to work with you guys moving forward on that.
The desktop study work done thus far would have been done regardless whether or not we were participants in Nourishment, correct?
Correct, and that desktop study is more or less complete. The offshore sand resource investigation, that was the one of the figures in the back of the proposal. That was kind of one of the final products. Mm-hmm. The crews are basically the other part of that contract that you all had approved as part of your monitoring contract, is to start working on getting the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management permits to be able to go out and actually do the physical data collection that's needed for that work.
Ken, does finding that new, is that part of this as well?
The new design.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I didn't hear that very clearly.
That were in here, is that all part of finding this new borrow area that will be closer to this?
Correct. The proposal that you have in front of you, includes the actual offshore investigations that would look at those borrow sources. And basically the way that we come up with that cost is we figure out how much it would take to do all of that work. And we had split that cost equally between the 4 towns. So I don't have the proposal sitting in front of me. I want to say that it's somewhere around $200,000, $201,000 in that neighborhood. But the total cost of all of that work is, 4 times that, basically being shared by the 4 towns equally there. And those are some of the things that, we're starting to move forward with that. We're starting to move forward with the environmental permitting. Again, we'll work with you guys, in over the next two weeks. We can certainly make it work, but it's just a matter of trying to, mitigate any of those, potential cost increases for some of the other towns and keeping them informed as to how things are progressing.
I'd like to also mention that we may have a few questions about some of what was in your proposal there. You've just answered one of mine, and that is that the fees are going to be split equally amongst the towns, but they're, I don't know. I've read through your proposal, but I'm not ready to vote on that right now. I suspect I will vote to approve, but I just want to know a little bit more when I do vote, what I'm voting for.
We can table that budget amendment till next meeting, and then we can circle back to, are we?
Yeah, I think we can move this till July 7th, and I think that Ken can live with that, or it sounds like he can, but I think we'll have to make we're gonna have to make a decision.
Yeah.
And it's either gonna be fish or cut bait.
Let's tackle that.
There's another comment that I wanted to offer to Ken, though, is in, Ken, I was around when Isabel hit, and I've been out here for more than 25 years and sat through more hurricanes than I can count. It's pushing 100. Isabel was one of those benchmark storms because it creamed the beaches. I am more familiar with the beaches from Nag's Head up to Duck. I did a lot of repair work out there. So I know that, I understand why you use that as one of the as the baseline storm to measure things against. So anyway, take that for what it's worth.
Weren't you talking about earlier how Floyd impacted it?
Floyd is another benchmark storm, but not for what it did to the beaches. Irene is a benchmark storm because of what it did when it came up to Sound.
Correct.
But Isabel was a benchmark storm because of what it did to our beaches out here.
That was my first hurricane.
I lost my home.
And the FEMA person was from South Dakota.
So we're gonna have a discussion about whether we move forward with beach nourishment or not, right before we do budget amendments and.
Well, is there a motion to?
Well, I thought we were going to move it to July.
The budget amendment, but we've had 300 comments, we've had public comment. There are some, I think there's been a lot of confusion on some of the math related to the tax increases that we, if we move forward, we really need to do some good education. Some of the comments we heard today will address that, but if today's the day to have a discussion. I'd rather
I'd rather tackle some of the rest of those questions too. I think we had some questions on the finance side that maybe are the Carters still with us?
Yes, I was going to say, Mr. Mayor, the Carters are available to answer some of the questions that came up.
If you guys are here, we'd like to take this opportunity to ask you some questions. Who would like to start?
Well, I think that...
Do we get better rates right now?
Well, I think that, where are we with, because I heard a couple times general obligation bonds versus maybe the MSD type approach. What's the benefit of a general obligation over the other, or vice versa?
I would also like to suggest that...
Townwide MSD, potentially.
Yeah.
I think all those things are for people.
Where are we?
I can't hear you, man.
Sorry.
If we could have them address that issue from their perspective.
Good morning, Andrew. Can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Fantastic. So I just added that question to my list. I believe it was GEO versus other types of financing vehicles. I believe what a couple of the questions that were directed to the financing side of this was the recurrence of the tax, or some are calling the assessment. They would be taxes. And for this particular project, they would need to be in place for the term of the financing that we're looking at for this particular beach project. So at least a 5-year term, which is what we're looking at for the financing period of this particular project. The board at that time, if the town no longer wants to be in beach nourishment business or so, could then change the tax, but the tax must be in place at least through the term of the financing that we're doing for this particular project that we're talking about. So it would be annual for at least 5 years. The second question dealt with, I believe someone mentioned a reserve fund of a sense for the town. And without getting too technical into the accounting of how all this would happen, the town would be setting up a separate fund, for lack of a better word, the beach fund. And the monies that would be levied from these taxes would go into that fund and be dedicated for beach nourishment purposes. So you'd be able to see the accounting every year of the money coming in from the taxes raised, the expenses going out. And in that fund, it could also take care of hopefully any annual maintenance that might be needed in the town, sand fencing, dune pushing, other minor annual repairs that might need to be had. It could also accumulate funds so that at the end of the 5-year period, there may be some fund balance that allows you to reduce the amount you have to borrow for the next project. You could put more cash down on the project rather than borrowing. And so in a sense, there would be a technical reserve fund set up that would accumulate the taxes that would be raised for beach nourishment. It would, in essence, be dedicated. As far as the question of the GO versus the other financing vehicles that are available to us in North Carolina, you know, these are legal mechanisms in North Carolina of which to raise funds. A general obligation bond basically pledges the full faith and taxing power of the town in order to pay its bills. And so you're basically pledging that we will raise taxes enough to pay those particular bills. I believe one of the council members was correct on a GO type of, you would be taxing the entire town the same amount. Special obligation bonds is a different legal vehicle that in essence packages up revenues instead of physical property, which you would have in probably most experience in borrowing, like your house or your car. There's a physical asset that is being secured that they can come and get. Beach sand is hard as an asset to come and get if you stop paying your bills. So we package up revenues as a collateral package in order to attract banks. And under North Carolina law, it requires the establishment of municipal service districts, MSDs as they're called, and you are able to tax MSDs for those projects. And that's the nature that y'all have been looking at so far, as creating districts of which to gain revenue, not on a level for everybody, but in order to create different places of gaining revenue in different parts of the town. So they are both legal mechanisms. GO requires a longer legal process. Your town attorney can go through more of that. It requires getting on the ballot for a vote. Special obligation bonds require just votes from town council. So ultimately, you'd have to raise the same amount of money. It's just different legal vehicles in order to get a financing done in North Carolina. Doug, did you have any comments?
Andrew, could I just make one comment there? And Mr. Mayor and members of council, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, a little better. Thank you.
I would just say that because the banking institutions that we would approach to loan you the money for your portion of this project have confidence in you, and they have confidence in the area because their county is unique in the state of North Carolina because of the partnership between towns and county government. And so because of your uniqueness, the banks that we would approach through an RFP process to lend you the money, I believe they would offer you the same rate that you would achieve if you offered a GO bond. So while GO has different legal parameters, we also tend to think of it as being slightly less expensive than other routes. I don't believe for a 5-year borrowing that the banks that would want to invest in the town of Southern Shores would charge a different interest rate. So I don't really see any cost difference on the interest. I will say, Andrew, and if it's your next question, throw something at me. The gentleman that talked about low interest rates, he's absolutely correct. They're unbelievable. We would be looking at 150 or below interest rates. I believe those are the 3 questions that I wrote down on my list. Were there any other questions?
1.5, sorry, sir.
You want to ask him?
Did you say 1.5 on the interest rate? I'm sorry, Mr. Carter.
I did say 1.50 or less. Currently. We can't promise anything in the future. And let me say this, just so I answer.
Thank you.
Well, we're also a year or more away from the borrowing. So assuming the similar financial environment we have today, it would be in that range or below. That's correct, Council Member. Mayor Pro Tempore, I should say.
Thank you.
I'd like to suggest that, or mention that in reading through the 300 plus or minus emails and some of the other comments offered here today, I've noticed a number of patterns going on here with the comments, and one of them is talk of assessments versus taxes. And as one gentleman at least one gentleman spoke to, is that a one-time deal, or is that a multiple-year deal, or is that a?
I'm still asking.
5 years.
Annual.
He said 5 years.
He said 5 years.
Yeah, and be 5 payments.
And yours would be $76 a year. You would be charged $76 a year. No, based on his tax value. So,
I was in the middle of making a couple comments. Can I please go ahead and finish those? Well, my point is that there's a lot of confusion over some of these terms and issues, like general obligation, special obligation, which Carter's just explained and everything. And so this is, I really think that in addition to voting to move forward or not, we need to come out with some kind of statements that we can post on our website that explains all this stuff to people. Because right now, people are getting their information from what they hear in public comments or on social media, and without the proper context, people are just coming up with questions that are very easily answerable, but yet we haven't answered most of them here at this public hearing. So again, this is kind of going back to that project management timeline. No offense to Mr. Wilson, but I kind of got ticked off that we were being hit with this proposal because while he has developed a timeline of the project and everything, we need to know what we're going to be facing before 1 week before a council meeting. So at Elizabeth's suggestion, we've deferred that until our new town manager comes on board. But in addition to that timeline or project management sheet, we need to start kind of coming up with some documents that explains this stuff that's easily readable for the public's sake. Anyway, that's.
Thank you, Jim. I agree with that.
Can I ask Carter's one more question?
Sure. I think so.
Would it be possible for you guys to put together maybe half a dozen slides, PowerPoint, the equivalent PowerPoint slides that would be sort of just a bare bones explainer that we could make available through our website, and maybe also put a link in our newsletter that we send out to our residents distribution list? I lost him.
Hello?
I mean, yes, I think we'd be able to do something like that, Doug.
Oh, absolutely. And we discussed this earlier in one of our earlier meetings, and I think we're prepared to do that, making sure it's done at the proper time and when you want it disseminated. So yes, we could do that.
And here, the last thing you said.
When, he says they can do something like that, you know,
Yes.
just some, basically what Councilman Connors just said, just some brief financial explainer PowerPoint slides that we could then make available to the town website and also through our newsletter. He's asking, when would we want that?
Once we decide to move forward. Within the next month or so. I mean, they've already done most of the legwork within their financial documents. I mean, you got average price, cost increase based on the MSD model, and we can all do the general obligation model or single MSD model. So I mean, until we start actually statutorily putting the MSDs in place, it's just estimates for people at best. But I mean, again, are we going to move forward with sand on the beach or not?
No,
Let's have that discussion.
Yeah,
Because all the finance stuff is pretty simple to solve personally. I mean, I know it's complicated, but it's are we going to embark upon this or not?
Yeah.
I mean, the public comments are indicative of the written comments. I think it was 49% pro to 45% negative, and a couple undecideds or questions about financials and things like that. So, you know, I keep leaning back to the comments that were emailed to us by a friend of mine who's also an oceanographer at the research pier that more or less says that we should be participating in a county-wide nourishment project. And some sand is better than no sand, and, you know, and that's kind of tipping the scales in my personal opinion. As much as I love the beach the way it is.
I agree with Matt. We need to either fish or cut bait.
I thought that was Leo.
That was me. I'm the one that used that term.
I've used that for years because it's better than the alternative.
Yeah, I know.
Commonly used.
But I think,
Sounds like either one of you guys have a patent on that or copyright.
no, that has been around long before me.
Is this still open for comment?
No.
Okay, I want to know what yes.
Well, not if we follow protocol, no.
Sorry, I'm not in charge.
Well, I think we need to look at, you know, I look at the beach as an asset. And any asset you own or have over time, you have to maintain it and have to look after it. Now, if we go and ask the question, you know, why do people come here? It's not because we have a big amusement park or anything of that nature. It's the beach is our attraction, and people come here for that. And if we're looking at it if you look at the beach as an expense, then you don't do anything. But I look at it as an asset, and I think we need to look after it.
Thank you, Leo. You want to put your thoughts into a motion, Matt?
I'm thinking on it.
While you're thinking about it, I'd like to go ahead and suggest that, keep it simple, that we move forward, and which option, which funding method and all that stuff, that we will base those decisions based on the fact that we are moving forward. I mean, we can work out the MSD and the different rates for each district and everything. But anyway, it's just a suggestion, Matt. I agree.
The only motion I would make if I were to make a motion would be to instruct the new town manager who takes office to proceed to pursue a budget amendment for coastal engineering to proceed with our project and pursue the nourishment.
So is that rolling in the budget amendment with the approval to?
Just at the next meeting, he'll present it.
Are we looking at two motions here or one?
I see it as one, but I don't want to confuse it.
I'm just
I can
asking.
restate it more clearly.
Then maybe they'll tell us what we.
I couldn't hear you, so you.
Yeah, sorry. I'm still in discussion mode rather than formal language mode, so forgive me. I mean, I feel like I want to explain my reasoning more to the public. Maybe there's another avenue for that for me later, but I will make a motion to instruct the new town manager, Cliff Ogburn, to present a budget amendment to proceed with coastal engineering at our July 7th meeting. And then when we vote on that, we're putting it in motion. So I don't think that needs it.
Where does that put us?
It puts us that we're going to be considering this $430,000 proposal at our July 7th meeting formally, and I'm also instructing the town manager to proceed with moving forward with beach nourishment. I guess would be a more simple way to say it. I can rephrase it again if you want. I mean, are we still in discussion? Are you guys ready to vote? I mean,
I'm ready to move on.
Well, then, let me just keep it simple. Proceed to move forward with beach nourishment.
I'll do a second on that motion, but I would like to, we're going to have a little bit more discussion, right?
We can. Any
Yes,
discussion?
once we get a motion and a second,
Okay.
then we can discuss it as long as we have to.
Okay. So we got a
I'd
motion?
kind of like to hear what the motion is, the entire motion is again.
I got it. I'm going to forget all the complicated part. I would like to make a motion that the town of Southern Shores pursues beach nourishment, period.
And I'll second that.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Have a motion and a second. Further discussion, council?
Yes.
Excuse me, Elizabeth.
Sorry, Leo. I personally think, well, first of all, I want to thank our staff for all the work that was done to put the postcard together, to get it out to our residents. I also want to thank our residents, our members of our town, our non-resident property owners for their passionate sharing of comments on both sides, because I've read them all, and they and there are close to 300 of them, I believe. Plus, we had another batch that had come in over the last year and a half, I guess.
Yeah.
That I've also read and compiled, whether it was positive or negative or neutral, needed more information. So I think it's a reflection on our community that everybody has some, a large percentage of people have some pretty strong feelings about this project. Personally, I would love to see the beach stay the way it is, because I like things natural. The problem is that we've come in and made changes to the landscape, and so it's not natural. It is, and I'm not willing to give up the beachfront homes, because that's about 25% of our tax base. So I think we'd just be shooting ourselves in the foot if we did that. So I think as an elected official, we have to look forward. And I think that's what this project is all about. It's playing defense. It's protecting what we have. So do I want to vote to do this? I'm really torn. Because I personally would rather see it stay the way it is.
Yeah, I think, but I feel similarly, and I think the reason we really wanted to solicit comments is the oceanfront MSD, and I know this isn't set in stone, bears the overwhelming brunt of this cost, and the feedback, not 100%, but the feedback largely has been supportive of the MSD and the additional taxes, and they are both in combination, largely the people asking for it and the people that are being asked to pay for it. And their property values are going to increase as a result, and they are going to see benefit with storm protection, and it's 50-50, and they're willing to move forward, and they're vocal about it. And again, I go back to a friend of mine who gave me some comments and analysis of our shoreline. I think that there isn't a big pointer scientifically of whether it needs to be done or not. But looking at the county as a whole and the county's contribution, it is a financial decision, and the people that are going to be bearing the brunt of it are overwhelmingly in support of it.
Yeah.
And just a little bit further, our tax rate now is definitely lower than what it would have to be if we didn't have the tourism dollars that come in. I mean, that's an obvious statement of fact. There's no arguing that. We are subsidized by our visitors. That's just a fact. between their sales tax and their occupancy taxes, they do allow us to have lower property taxes. Furthermore, the county is in the business of putting sand on the beach. The county has been in the business of putting sand on the beach for almost 10 years. And they're going to continue to do it because they're going to continue to collect those occupancy taxes that funds that activity. And so we would certainly not do this without the county, and we would definitely not do this without the other towns participating. So my support is contingent on those two aspects, the towns participating and the county participating. Okay, I'm done now. Thank you.
We can't support the program by itself. We've got to be part of a group, because the mobilization costs are astronomical on these. And so I don't like spending that kind of money, but if we don't, and we wait for, let's see, the next one would be 2027 or 20, the earliest, and maybe as late as 2029. In the meantime, we don't know what the beach is going to do. And if it was compromised, I think we'd be criticized as well. The cost that we're talking about now will be much more.
That came out in a couple of the emailed comments too, where actually we got something from a resident down in Avon or Rodanthe, another one from Duck, but I seem to recall reading another comment that this is a regional problem. This is more than Southern Shores.
And if we don't participate this round, then we'll have them waiting to, for that another to 2027, 2029, when they would be redoing their project again. And in between time, we're rolling the dice.
Yeah, no way, we can't control it. So we have to react to what happened.
Yeah, and I know Kill Double Hills and Kitty Hawk have approved theirs already.
Yeah, they're moving ahead. Duck will probably do it tomorrow night.
Yeah.
Sheila, would you repeat the motion back to Matt gave us?
Simplify, pursue beach nourishment.
I couldn't hear you.
Pursue beach
To
nourishment.
pursue beach nourishment. That was the whole motion. Matt simplified it.
Is that simple?
That's
fine. Proceed with or pursue, either one. Yeah. Any other discussion? Any further discussion? You all heard the motion. We've had a second to that motion. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Go around the table. Elizabeth, you want to start with it?
Aye.
Leo?
Aye.
Matt?
Aye.
And the mayor votes aye. So the motion is made and carried to proceed with pursue beach nourishment. I think that's the same as proceed with beach nourishment. I hope it is.
Yes, sir. May I ask one question?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I have for clarity. Y'all have just voted to pursue or move forward with beach nourishment. Do you still want to wait to move forward with the contract, the proposal that Ken Wilson has submitted until July, in the July meeting?
Yes.
Yes.
I would, because I'd like to read through that a little more, because I had questions that popped up. They're not make or break questions. They just want to understand what I'm going to be voting for.
I think we do want to have Cliff on board, so yes, I would say we want to delay that.
Yeah, I understand. I just wanted to make sure that was still part of the direction.
Some of this too is kind of like Cliff pick this thing up and run it from its genesis. It's starting with
and he's got
that seems semantic and silly, but that's, let's let this be something he shepherds through.
Well, and he's got the experience. He's been through.
I do. Is Ken still there? Or did he sign off?
No, I'm still here.
Couple of real quick questions. The borrow areas you identified looked pretty much, or the areas you're going to study are right on the Kitty Hawk, and it's right off the shore for us. You haven't done any sampling in that area. It looks like you just identified it from the desktop, correct?
That's correct. We Some of that data was available to us back in like 2014 when we did some work, when we did a similar desktop study, but some of it is new information. And, some of the assumptions that we're making are based off of the data that was collected in 2014 for the eventual borrow site. So.
And then well, this is real technical. You got a modeled shoal shading? What is a modeled shoal? So then you're assuming it's there because of depth information, or?
No, I think, let me pull that up. I think in the term modeled there means that it's essentially like a mix. It's more of a geological term.
Okay.
A mix of like interlayered layers of sandy material and finer grain, muddier materials. I think that's what the reference to.
It's a composition term, not yeah, I got you. All right. And then the other question I had, one of the things that's just really, really serious and important, I mean, we have a very unique sand grain in Southern Shores that's not necessarily consistent with duck and kitty hawk. And I mean, how have you handled a project where you might have that discrepancy from town to town? I mean, will we be, I mean, you're looking at a borrow area that has the general composition of the entire project, but I'm concerned, and I don't know that there's a good answer for it, that if we were to move forward, we don't have the composition that we currently see. And I saw how you break it down. You take the averages, across a couple stations and develop it. But how do you see that playing out for our town? Because our grain composition is pretty unique compared to the others.
Sure, that's a great question, Matt. I mean, we are going to do everything we can to try to match these things up as close as possible. I can give you a couple of anecdotes of how things worked out for the town of Duck. The borrow site that was identified directly offshore of Duck had a finer grain material, and we're talking about fractions of a millimeter here. We're talking about really really minor differences, but in general, it was a little finer than the material that was in that borrow site that was all the way offshore of Kildable Hills. But the discrepancy between the costs of getting a cubic yard of sand from the Duck borrow area versus a cubic yard of sand from the Kildable Hills borrow area was a significant cost difference. So in the end, what we allowed the contractor to do was that if they wanted to get cheaper sand for the same rate, they could basically mix part of the material from the Duck borrow site with, it was basically like one load from the Duck borrow area with two loads from the other borrow site that was offshore of Kildable Hills to kind of, we could theoretically mix those two grain sizes and figure out what the difference would be and try to match it up better with what's actually in Duck. So the southern part of the town's project was built 100% with material from the coarser grain borrow site off of Kildable Hills, whereas the northern half of that project in Duck was built with a mix of that offshore sand and the sand from the same borrow site down at Kildable Hills. We're not seeing any significant differences in the shape of the profile from north to south. We've seen some higher losses in the southern area, but we think that has more to do with the abrupt termination of the project that we had to deal with because of the field research facility being there. And then in Kitty Hawk, their native beach is actually more coarse than both Kildable Hills and Duck's native grain size on the beach. And so when we built in the construction specifications for Kitty Hawk, the dredge contractor was required to use certain cells within the borrow site that were found to have more coarser material. They were required to use that coarse material to build Kitty Hawk before they could use those same cells to construct parts of Kildable Hills or parts of Duck. So, it does get into that sort of detail to take the sediment resources that we have permitted and the actual grain size on the beach and do, the best we can. And sometimes we get into some, fairly specialized circumstances in how we ask for the project to be constructed to match those grain sizes up as well as possible.
Thank you. That answers my question pretty specifically. The The last related to the borrow site, probably answering my own question, you don't have any samples from that area, so you don't know what the composition of it is or have a speculation on how promising it might be for us.
Yeah, I mean, the best we can do is look at what it looks like in remote sensing surveys, like sub-bottom profile surveys. The data that's available is older data. The resolution's not great, but we can sort of compare those records with records that were run through the borrow sites that we did end up using, and say that, you know, there are some similarities there. We also have some, I believe, some superficial grain size samples in those areas, but no actual cores that would, you know, penetrate to the depths that we'd be looking for to make sure that, you know, that the entire deposit is going to be compatible.
Does that borrow area have to be approved by CAM or DCM?
BOEM.
Yes, sir. It will have to be approved by CAMA and the Corps of Engineers. And it will, and the state actually, the CAMA, the state actually has a fairly rigorous sediment criteria standards that need to be followed, where certain samples need to be taken from the beach, certain number of samples and density of samples have to be taken from that borrow site, and there has to be agreement within the amount of fine grain material, the amount of cobbles, and you know, different class sizes in the native deposits and the sand source deposit. And then actually, if the borrow site, which both of them were, you know, fit this criteria in 2017, if the borrow area is located more than 3 miles offshore of the shoreline, it falls into federal jurisdiction, which means the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management actually has to approve the use of the borrow area, and actually the county will need to obtain a lease to mine that material and place it on the beach. Because it's being used for you know, a public project, it's not that BOEM will charge you fees for every cubic yard that you take out there, but there is a fairly rigorous process to go through to get that lease in place. And the lease itself will have certain conditions about reporting on data collection and monitoring as the project goes on into the future. But it's all something that was done for that original 2017 project. Is something that we're very familiar with the process.
There's a fair amount of oversight from outside.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions for Ken?
Nope.
Ken, I want to thank you, and I want to thank others.
If I can make one more comment, Mr. Mayor. On some of Jim's comments about the cost and the schedule, certainly understand where he's coming from. That was a big proposal that's dropped in council's lap a week before this meeting. But I would say, you know, Wes and I have been talking about, you know, the details of those proposals, and you know, some of the original schedules that we had provided had these, you know, had this process starting, you know, as early as April or May, trying to get into that process and starting that process. And I'd say we've probably done a decent job of defining in general what those services would be that are required to move this project forward. And as far as the fees, I mean, I get where you guys are coming from, and I'm looking forward to the discussion with Cliff, because he does have a fair amount of experience in, you know, where these costs should be and what, you know, what services are required to do this type of project. Certainly happy to sit down and talk to him about those things. But I'll say that the fees that are included in this proposal have always been included in the entire cost of the project when we provide you guys cost estimates. And in fact, the current proposal, the fees that are in there for the borrow area development and the environmental permitting and the engineering design are all, you know, are all lower than those original estimates that we had made when we created placeholders, if you will, for the soft costs, for the engineering and environmental costs that went into our cost estimating in the beginning to come up with your total project cost. So, yeah, those costs, not specifically, haven't been presented with these costs, but they're certainly part of the total package that have been presented to you all. And just want to make that clarification. But like I said, I'm looking forward to talking to Cliff about some of the details here.
Well, and I'd like to mention to you that my comments were definitely not a criticism of you. It's more of a frustration on our end that we keep getting presented with things that we either did not see coming or anticipate at that time. And It's mostly just an argument for developing a project management thing so that we can keep both council and the public abreast of the sequence of events and everything here.
Okay.
I think Cliff will have that capability since he went through the Nags Head project.
Well, a lot of us have that capability, but he's probably the best since.
That's correct.
For the very reasons. That's why I'm not pushing it to be done yesterday.
Going back, Ken, once again, I want to thank you for your contribution this morning, almost afternoon. And I also want to thank the Carters, father and son, for your help this morning. Appreciate you being here.
Very welcome.
Yeah, I thank the people in the audience for their patience and sticking with it. Unless council has something else to say, somebody does, I'd like to make a motion for adjournment.
I just want to recognize David Bradley on the afternoon of 5 July, which was going to be on a Friday.
June.
June, thank you. Spindrift Trail, we had a limb come down there, and a large limb that was blocking one lane of the traffic. And I haven't seen it. I called since I got in touch with David. He shows up there after he was off. Just moved the limb out of the big limb out of the way. He managed, I don't know how he did it, but he got it down, got it all up, and you never knew it was there. So David, since you did it after hours, I want to, his neighbors down there want to thank you for it. So I don't know if he's still.
Right behind you.
I did have some help from Mark.
Oh, okay. I didn't see him there. I'll give you all the credit.
Thank you, Leo. I just, that's all I have to add to I'm glad you added that to our meeting.
Mr. Mayor, can I
Yes,
ask?
yes, Bonnie, you can.
Clarification, I just want to make sure that on the budget amendment, because you didn't say the revenue
I was
source
actually
will
gonna-
be from the unassigned
I was
fund
going to
balance.
address both.
The unassigned fund balance for the barrels. Is
Yes.
that your
Correct.
wish?
That's exactly right.
I just needed that. Thank you.
I didn't include that.
Where else would?
We'll send the building amount.
Mr. Mayor, I just have
Currituck County.
Mr. Mayor, I just have one further thing, and then I promise to let us go.
Yeah, good. Good.
In the news this morning, has been the federal, I think it's BOEM, Bureau of Ocean and Energy Management, has overruled the state's objection to preventing seismic survey off of our shoreline for oil and gas exploration.
Yeah, we heard that. Thank you.
Yeah.
So at some point, I might want to speak to council about possibly a resolution to encourage our legislature to fight this tooth and nail, because that's not what we need to have happening off of our coast.
I agree with you totally. I think most people in this county do, and the resolution is a great idea. We already had one on 5, maybe more than one. We could certainly file another even stronger, one more strongly worded.
Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
This is one of those things, again, where I think all 5 communities and the county was going to speak louder than one town, so we need to coordinate efforts on that one, too.
Thank you.
And I just have one last comment. I apologize. Right before our recess, or during our recess this morning, checked my email, and NCDOT had responded to my inquiry about programming the left turn signal on 158 for our no left turn weekends. And he confirmed that they can be reprogrammed and that they're currently working on it.
Okay, that's good news. So we can program the sign, so it's going to say no left turn all the time.
The red arrow will be there constantly.
Mr. Mayor, in addition to just replying to something Ms. Morey said, I'd like to sincerely thank all the members of the public who offered comments, no matter what forum they used, whether it was public speaking or email or whatever. I think that was an education for me.
Good session this morning. I thought.
Yes.
Totally.
Okay.
Well, I'm going to not deny my body's adjourned.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
All right. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Please adjourn. You want to talk to John with this question about his tax?
Yeah. Yes.
the email.
47